Ken Oforiatta. Yeah, Osarfo Marfo is going for the position of senior minister. Osarfo Marfo, that's him. And then Ken Oforiatta is going to be for the position of finance. So Evelyn Tingma has joined us now. Let's find out what she's saying.
Of the nominee, they are all here, and so the process is just about to begin. So currently the prayer is ongoing.
To be well and truly served, with good purposes, for the common human life be realized in our midst. O God, grant us the vision of our country, fair as it might be, a country of righteousness, where none shall wrong his neighbor, a country of plenty, where evil and poverty shall be done away with, a country of brotherhood, where all success shall be founded on service, and honor shall be given to the deserving, a country of peace, where government shall rest on the will of the people and the love for the common good. Bless the efforts of those who struggle to make this vision a living reality. Inspire and strengthen our people that they may give time, thought, and sacrifice to speed the day of the coming beauty of Ghana and Africa. Amen.
Joseph Osei-Wusu, who has just said the parliamentary prayer. You know, everywhere parliaments or members of parliament meet, it is a parliament house. And so the chairman has just said the prayer, and he is now about to invite the nominee. And of course, he will welcome some people to Parliament for the process to start.
I wish all of us to respect it, but in particular to remind everybody that this is a meeting of Parliament, and if you're not a member, you're not permitted to speak. If there's a member of Parliament, not a member of this committee, who wishes to ask a question, he may seek permission with the chair, and if the circumstances permit, we would allow the person to ask the question. May I now ask the clerk to invite the first nominee, Honorable Hon.Osarfo Marfo. Whilst we are waiting for the nominee, I'll invite members to introduce themselves so that the watching public will know which members of Parliament are here. I'll start from my right.
Sarah Hon.Osarfo, Member of Parliament for Dome Kwabenya and Vice Chair of the Committee.
Kwesi Amyauchembe, MP for Sunyani East and Majority Chief Whip, Member of the Committee.
Mahama Ayariga, Member of Parliament, Boku Central, Member of the Committee.
Barbara Asha AC, MP for Cape Coast North, a Member of the Committee.
Matthew Prempe, MP for Menchia South.
Esla Owusu Ekufo, MP for Ablekuma West.
Amantin constituency.
Eric Opoku, MP for Sinafo South.
Benis Adikuhelu, MP for Hohwe.
Samsonahi, MP for Bodi.
Kweku Rickethagen, MP for Cape Coast South.
Samuel Okujetu Ablakwa, MP for Northton.
Kwame Abuja, MP for Adaklu.
Daniel Nikwate, Titus Glover, Tema East.
Samuel Atachia, the Member of Parliament for Achimabakwa South.
Al-Hassan Suhini, MP for Tamale North and Member of the Committee.
Joseph Kujo, MP for Efia Constituency.
Obi Amwa, MP Ekwapim South, Member of this committee.
Joseph Kofiada, MP for Nabrongo Central.
Patricia PJ, MP for Asqua.
Joseph Yelechire, MP for Wa West. Mamba.
Dominic Nito, the MP for Bimbila constituency.
Anthony Cabo, MP for Laura, member of this committee.
Edwin Nilante Vanderpoel, MP Odododio.
Muntaka Mubarak, member of parliament for Swansea, and then the deputy ranking for this committee.
Aruna Idrisu, member of parliament for Tamale South, and ranking member for the committee.
Joseph Oseusu, I'm chairman of the committee. An MP for Bekwai. Now, can you please swear the nominee?
I, Hon.Osarfo Marfo,
swear by Almighty God
swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give before this committee
touching
the matter in issue
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Honorable Hon.Osarfo, on behalf of the committee, I wish to congratulate you on your nomination by the President to the position of Senior Minister of his government. May I start by asking you to give us a short brief of yourself.
Was born in Achim, Awisa in 1942. He attended
in mechanical engineering, worked at Valco as a process and quality control engineer, left Valco to join now the Ghana Investment Center as an investment promotion officer, later taken to Frankfurt as the director of Ghana Investment Center, came back to Ghana after that period and joined the Bank for Housing and Construction there as the chief manager in charge of operations. Rose through the ranks to become the managing director of the bank, 1979. Later, was taken to the National Investment Bank as a managing director. Later, I became member of parliament for Achim-Odan constituency, in opposition in the beginning. Before I open the floor, can you tell us briefly what is your brief, what has the President asked you to do in that position as next time the Minister of Business, the President said not to just leave his ministers, but he invited the ministers and called us one by one and told the whole country what he wanted to do, therefore, and why he wanted to perform. I've also had a very extensive discussion with the President about my job as a Senate minister. From our manifesto, one of the major titles of the President is transforming money. Because actually, the economy is something good. We are now in an IMF program, and we're going to come out with flying colors. The President told me specifically that we, that is the MPP, have had a senior minister, the person of Mr. J.H. Mensah, whom I worked with because at the time I was the Minister of Finance. And he coordinated the economic sector ministries. When you talk about the economic sector ministries, you take all the ministers, you have the social sector, you have the infrastructure sector, you have the economic sector, and then you have governance and security. All the productive sectors are referred to as economic sector, and there will be a major block as a subcommittee of Parliament and coordinate the activities of the economic sectors of its cabinet as it may be. And he wanted me to bring my experience as a Minister of Finance, as somebody who have done a similar job in Uganda, a similar job in Liberia, to bear, to try and, you see, no ministry, when you talk about economic ministry, is independent of the central economy. The reason why industry is not working is because there may be lack of capital. And this relates to Minister of Finance. This relates to the banks and that kind of thing. So I'm playing a coordinating role for the economic sector, as it were. The economic sector relates to other ministries. So naturally, my experience will be brought upon to bear on my colleagues to make sure that we resuscitate the economy in a very homogenized manner so that there will be harmony. We all sing from the same hymn sheet, as it were.
Now we'll start from the left. Every member would.
Honorable Hon.Osarfo Marfo, this is a meeting of record. Do I take it that you are assuming that your role as senior minister will be to coordinate the economic sectors of this government, and that will assume that non-economic ministries will not be under your purview? Is that the case?
It's yes and no. When you're talking about the economic sector of the ministry, it also relates to the other sectors. And therefore, when you are playing that role of coordinating, that your main job primarily will be to coordinate the activities of the economic sectors, but it has its influence on the other sectors. So you would be linking also up with them. When you talk about economy, it is the economy that drives the whole system. So you can't isolate it per se. I'll be linking with the other ministries, as it were.
Okay. Now, Honorable Nilante van der Poel.
Honorable Osarfo Marfo. First, let me ask from your brief. You are to transform the economy, coordinate the economic sector ministries. What will be the relationship between your office, the NDPC, and the Ministry of Finance?
Thank you very much. If you look at the Constitution carefully, the NDPC is a super planning center. They are supposed to have the national planning and also be responsible for the secretary. So we want to create a business-friendly environment for government. When you talk about economic sectors, it includes the Ministry of, let's say, Lands and Natural Resources. One of the major hindrances to business in Ghana is land acquisition. In fact, the method is so complicated that sometimes when you look at it, and many of you have had experience, you don't understand. To really make the environment business-friendly, we've got to look and look again at a land acquisition system in this country. And as a senior minister coordinating these economic ministries, that will be one of my focus. Because people come ready to invest, and some of them are put off because of people selling land to them, 2, 3, multiple sale of the same land, that kind of thing. Sometimes it is embarrassing. Some of these probably look small, but they are complicated. Rent system in this country. Now, there is nowhere in the world where you pay rent advance 2 years. It's nowhere in the world. If you go to Germany, by law, you can't take caution more than 3 months. In our part of the world, people can take 2 years. When there was a problem in Cote d'Ivoire, Mr. Fan, people wanted to relocate from Cote d'Ivoire to Ghana. I was involved. They were put off by the rent advance. Because if he's going to get a premises for $5,000 and he's to pay for 2 years advance, 5 times 12, 60,000 times 2, 120,000. That is, you are taking off his working capital. And therefore, these are some of the things which may not look too obvious, harmful to the economy, but it is harmful to the economy. Many of them were not prepared to borrow additionally to rent houses in Accra, and therefore they moved to other places. So these are areas we have to look at to make the environment business friendly. We're talking about business friendly. It's also among foreigners, not only Ghanaians, but also among foreigners. There are some of these small things. Try to get a company registered in this country. And some of you have gone through and you know it. Some of these things, and you don't understand why we should make some of these simple things so difficult for ourselves as a country. It has persisted through governments. And I think I would really want to hit at them and get Parliament to help us to straighten some of these things from the law angle. Because if there is a law that you can't take more than 3 months rent advance, then there is a law. And then everybody will obey it. But as long as you leave it free of charge, then people will take it. I would say that I live on rent. I would prefer 2 years, but I don't think it's fair to the business environment. Now, on the IMF program, it will certainly be reviewed. And there are 2 main reasons why the IMF program must be reviewed. I've already hinted one of the bosses of the IMF. Now, President Nana Akufo-Addo came out with a manifesto. And that manifesto, he needs fiscal space to move it. The current program literally squeezes all this fiscal space out. And therefore, from the point of view of the program of the NPP, the IMF program must be reviewed. 2, now the IMF program works along achieving targets. And the targets are set between the government and the IMF. So far, most of the targets have been missed. And therefore, whether we even ask for it or not, the IMF would themselves want the program reviewed. Because if we talked about ensuring that your growth end of the year is 5.3% and your growth end of the year is 3.3%, it's way out. If you want to talk about deficit being not more than 5%, and everybody thought deficit was about 5%, the figures I'm seeing from Bank of Ghana, deficit is getting between 8 and 9%. That is enough signal for the IMF itself to request for review, because you can't go on when you haven't met the targets. What going on with what? And therefore, the program will certainly be reviewed from 2 angles, from the targets angle and from our own need to factor in our manifesto and our objective in governance.
Thank you. My next question, Mr. Chairman.
Before you proceed, please. I think it is important that we put it on record that in Ghana, there's a law which saying that for domestic accommodation, you cannot take more than 3 months. And for commercial accommodation, you cannot take more than 6 months. The challenge is the enforcement. And lawyers have a way of going around that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My next question is, Honorable Minister, the President has indicated that, Minister Designate, the President has indicated that his economic program is going to shift the focus from economic management, from taxation to production. My question is, and I guess many people in the public will agree that it has come up for discussion. Without taxation, how is government going to raise the revenue to support production? So what are the steps or measures you are going to put in place to ensure that this idea of moving away from taxation to production is achieved?
Thank you very much. This is a very important question. The government is not saying that it will not collect taxes. I describe as a nuisance tax, because the efforts of even doing the collection is not worth it. You create hindrances in production. And one such tax is the financial sector VAT tax of 17.5%. You are taxing banks on their profit as you tax all the other companies. Now, financial sector transactions deals with my operations within the bank, what would have been COT and related issues. You want to tax those. Even to come out with the figures after the operation itself is a problem to the banks. And that's what you want to tax. The 17.5%, to me, is an unnecessary tax. And you should do away with it. It, to me, is a nuisance tax. Now, we talk about corporate tax. So sometimes you should be talking about having a bigger net to collect from, rather than knowing that a few people, no matter what you do, they will pay, and you keep on increasing the taxes. This is what Ghana has been doing for quite some time. Corporate tax, we said in our manifesto, is going to come from 25% to 20%. Withholding tax has to be withheld. What is withholding tax? It's a lazy way of taxing. Somebody is taxed in advance of an operation and is allowed to take it at the end. What does it do? You are taking people's working capital. And it's 5–10%. Such taxes should be looked at. We're looking at production. We are looking at making this whole thing friendly to businesses. So any tax that creates a hindrance to business, we are going to look at. Our first budget, which will be in early March, will review all these taxes, and we will announce to the country through the budget which taxes we will do away with. We did mention them in our manifesto, and we are going to keep to the promise. We've already met on this 3 times. That's the economic sectors, and we are looking at the relevant figures to inform our budget.
My last question. I just looked at your CV, and there's some part of it that says that you have some knowledge in German.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's the language or it's the culture of the people. If you can throw a few German lines, we'll be happy.
Wie geht's?
What does that mean?
How are you?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm fine.
All right, thank you. We will move to the right. Honorable Ayaga.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Article 78(1) of the Constitution says that ministers of state shall be appointed by the President with the prior approval of Parliament from among members of Parliament or persons qualified to be elected as members of Parliament. Honorable Hon.Osarfo is not a member of Parliament, but I believe he is among persons qualified to be elected as members of Parliament. He was a former member of Parliament. He's not a member of Parliament. If you go to Article 94 of the Constitution, it says that one of the criteria for being eligible to contest is that he has paid all his taxes or made arrangements satisfactory to the appropriate authorities for the payment of his taxes. And if you also go to Article 286 of the Constitution, which deals with declaration of assets, it says that when you are in public office, before you take over, you declare your assets, or at the point of taking over, you declare your assets. And when you leave public office, you declare your assets. I'm simply asking whether you have met these constitutional eligibility criteria to become a minister of state under Article 78.
Thank you very much. I have with me my tax grant certificate, which then qualifies the 94 you talked about, and that is up to the end of 2016. We were given guidelines by the Office of the Appointment Committee to sort this thing out, and I've done it. I'm a very faithful taxpayer. And on the declaration of assets, I've done declaration twice when I was minister, MP, and I did both in and out. I'm sure one of the few who did it. I was one of those who were preaching the theory of declaring assets and making them public. At the time, we were overruled then by majority of the people, because I did not really understand declaring the assets and keeping them confidential only to the Auditor General, but that's my personal view. So at the appropriate time, if your committee confirms my appointment, be expected to declare my assets, I'll do it the third time. And whatever method would have been put in place on the declaration of assets, I will surely follow suit.
For the record, the committee has a certificate from the Revenue Agency's authority that he is satisfied them with regard to his taxes, the Hon.Osarfo Marfo. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, with regards to the asset declaration, a receipt is normally issued. Do you also have that? As at now, he is not a public officer yet. So as to his previous position, I was not privy to it, and I'm not eligible to ask him in that respect. Yeah, just clarification. No. Discuss the matters after. Well, it is a follow-up question. If you that's because you intervened to provide evidence. So I'm asking for further evidence from you, and you are running away from that one, Mr. Chairman. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second question, Honorable Osarfo Marfo, is your status as senior minister the same as a minister of state under Article 78 of the Constitution? In a sense, are you equal to your colleagues like any other minister, or are you superior in rank? Are you higher in rank than any of the other ministers of state? And if I'm asking a question in Parliament for somebody to come and answer questions regarding the economy, should you be the one I should ask the question to, or I should ask the question to the Minister for Finance?
Thank you, Honorable Member. Since you are referring profusely to the Constitution, may I take your indulgence to also read Article 78.2? With your permission, Mr. Chairman, Article 78.2 reads, the President shall appoint such number of ministers of state as may be necessary for the efficient, and I'm emphasizing efficient, running of the state. The President has the prerogative to appoint these ministers. As to naming, we decide to call an octopus minister, I mean, the only one minister is mentioned in this constitution of ours, and that is the Attorney General. In other clauses, 5 other ministers have been mentioned: Finance, Interior, and Defense under the Security, because they are members of the Security Council. Now, I'm certainly Minister of State. His Excellency the President, in his wisdom, defined my work and decided that I should be called Senior Minister because I have a coordinating role to play. And this is not the first time. J.H. Mensah did the same. Knowing the kind of experience J.H. Mensah had, and I can assure you, J.H. Mensah had a tremendous influence on our performance as a government. So I think I will not answer questions raised on finance. It will be answered by the Minister of Finance. I told you I'm doing a coordinating role. If you want to ask questions related to coordination, I will come and answer that.
So the simple answer is that you are not superior to any minister. You are equal to all them. You are co-equal to all the ministers, if I may use that expression.
I'm a minister who is also, and in coordinating, you could also flex muscles here and there for information. You are coordinating, you need to collect data, you need to match things, and you can't just sit, and if you ask figures, you set targets and people don't bring, wouldn't you request and insist on them?
Mr. Chairman. No. I asked a specific question. As a Minister of State under Article 78, whether you are co-equal to all your colleague ministers or you are superior in ranking to them, and you said you are a minister who is coordinating, and because of that you can flex your muscles. What kind of muscles can you flex? Because you are all equal.
If you ask somebody, we need data to do certain things, to do analysis. And if you ask somebody to bring the data and the data is not coming, what will you do? If you are coordinating, you must find a way of getting that information. And you must give him or her a deadline that I want this information, but otherwise we can't run the system. The system must be run with some discipline in it, wouldn't it? Wouldn't you think so? If you are coordinating and whatever you ask, it doesn't come, what will you do? You sit down and look into the air? I think I have to literally have some guidelines. So far, in the transition, I'm doing the same, and I haven't had any problem with anybody. People are so ready to make sure that we are singing with the same hymn sheet. We want to achieve economic transformation. And that calls some efforts, that calls for some discipline, that calls for an analysis. Analysis can only be done with figures. And if the figures are with you and you won't bring it, shouldn't we take steps to get them from you?
Barbara, please.
Thank you very much.
Just a moment. The leader wants to chip in something. Honorable Majority Leader, please.
Mr. Chairman, well, I think a question was asked by the Honorable Ni Lante in respect of the position of the NDPC, and the answer provided by the nominee is that he personally thinks that planning should not even go beyond 10 years. Of course, he said it's his personal view. We're formulating for ourselves a 40-year, some people even wanted to say 50-year development plan. To what extent, Mr. Nominee, would you agree that the very architecture of the NDPC itself would suggest that their own plans should not exceed a certain period? In particular, given the fact that the membership is membership that is entrusted on the commission by a certain president. To what extent would a certain president, who perhaps is a socialist, define the path of national development for a capitalist government? To what extent would you agree that the very architecture of the NDPC itself, as enshrined in the Constitution, is problematic?
In fact, you have answered the question for me. It really means that for anybody to think about a 40-year development plan, when you have governments coming in, center right, center left, and that kind of thing, it's not practical. because the people who man this plan matter in their ideology and in their thinking. And therefore, there's no point doing a plan which will be altered drastically by people who come in. So do it within a period that is likely to be sustained. That is why I think of 5-10 years. And I'm yet to look at these advanced countries. Mr. President, I had some attachment with the German Minister of Finance. And they never, when you talk about planning in Germany, nobody goes beyond 10 years. But it is a rolling plan. So you do this and you revise, and it becomes attainable, it becomes workable. The whole world, technology is such that some of the things costing us 20 today will cost us 1 tomorrow because of technology. So some of trying to think ahead 40 years, to me, is problematic. To me, is problematic because of even the whole architecture of the world thinking and technology. So I completely agree with you. If you bring in the question of ideology, then the 40 years is just too long, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman. Yeah. Chairman, I'm compelled to come on a follow-up to the majority leader's question as to the straight dichotomy between capitalist and social government. Is the MPP a socialist or a capitalist government, for the record, Honorable Minister Designate?
Thank you very much. The MPP is center-right party. The MPP is center-right party. And I assume that the NDC is left, as they claim to be.
Very well. Honorable Barbara, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Marfo, you have such an impressive CV. You've been a minister, and between 1990 to 1992, you were the managing director of the National Investment Bank. And you stated that within a space of 2 years, you were able to declare profits. As a senior minister, how are you going to coordinate the activities of all the ministries to bring about growth and development?
I think our number one problem we have in this country is unemployment. And the unemployment is assuming alarming proportion because the economy is not growing. The economy in 2011 grew at 14%. The economy today is growing at about 3-4%. Chairman, that is the problem. And therefore, all of us will have to think about growth. And thinking about growth means that we have to look at our economic ministries to pave the way for the private sector to operate smoothly. That's why we're described as private sector friendly system we want to put up. We need growth to be able to solve our unemployment problem. And as a senior minister, I will coordinate with my colleagues to think and dream growth, to do things that will enable the private sector come in a big way to assist with growth. If you look at other projects and programs we have in our manifesto, we're talking about one district, one factory. All these are to ginger growth, and we're certainly going to pursue them. You need capital to do this. Therefore, one of the challenges of this government will be accessing capital. And I think we're going to do our best to access capital to make this realizable.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marfo, some people of the view that your role overlaps that of the Chief of Staff. Can you clarify so that the ordinary Ghanaian will know specifically your role? And how different is that from the Chief of Staff, please?
I think from the definition I gave you, it must be very different. The Chief of Staff role coordinates the total ministries, and he is working to enhance the Secretariat of the President. Normally, all things which happen around the President do so through the Chief of Staff. And in that case, her role is not specifically on the economic sectors. Mine is specifically on the economic sectors because of the President's dream of economic transformation. It's a question of emphasis. But the Chief of Staff will be coordinating everything combined and running the Secretariat of His Excellency the President. The Chief of Staff's role is slightly different. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm done.
We want to start from on the senior MP to tarry a while. No, we are starting from then, the last two, and then we'll come to the right, the last two.
Mr. Chairman, congratulations, Uncle. There has been a lot of discussion on social media, including the traditional media, in terms of the size of His Excellency Akufo-Addo's government, particularly in terms of the appointees that he's coming out with. May I respectfully ask you, looking at the vision of the president, whether it is justified for him to have more ministers to prosecute his agenda or lesser ministers to look at the work that he wants to do for our country. So from where you are sitting as the coordinator of economic ministers for the president, do you think it is justified for him to have more ministers to enable him to do his job? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the earlier clause of the Constitution I read said that for the efficient running of the state. Therefore, the decision is that of His Excellency the President. Sometimes, let's say Minister for Railways, if you hear it and you listen to the discussions out there, you find out that completely people have missed the point. Mr. Chairman, transportation is either by air, by sea, by land or rivers. Now, since Governor Gagisbeck did the 1919-27 Kadehune Valley, because it passes through my hometown road, there have not been any major railway crossing. Now, to think about constructing railway is not as simple as it appears. Think about aviation. You can go and pay your money and take your plane, and the following day you are running because the airport is done by somebody else. Railway is different. Indeed, the structural or civil engineering works of laying railway lines, physical, just physical, let us all imagine. And in our constitution, we have what? The eastern line should go from Kumasi to Paga. If we are going to implement a line, and our line should be first of all realigned and renovated. Our lines are obsolete. The gauge of the line we use at the moment, if we are going to go modern on railways, have to be looked at. Therefore, it means completely overhaul. That's what our manifesto says of the rail system. The amount of work involved in doing the civil engineering part requires more than a minister. Mr. Chairman, not only that, railway financing is very complicated because you require medium to long-term finance. It's different from aviation. It's different from buses, from road. The railway, you need to have long-term financing because the repayment is long and the inflow is slow. But if we want to save our road networks, we need to go rail. We need to make sure that the railway comes live to carry goods so that all the heavy goods that will go by rail, take passengers as well, but the emphasis will be goods. And I think that the attention of one minister to do this is not too much. There's a lot of work involved. If I were to look at the railway minister, I'll give him 2 deputies. I'll give him someone who understands long-term financing to be chairing and helping with the financing because it's a whole job. I'll be looking at somebody with some good engineering background to also be looking at the civil so that the minister is holistic. So, but when the ordinary person hears Minister for Railways, oh, this is part of transport, why is the president taking them? It's monolithic. It looks, it's just a single project. It is not a single project. The involvement is such that it requires, if we want to do it the way Akufo-Addo dreams, then it requires a minister. And no wonder that for a long time, we have not done much in our railway sector. I mean, take Ghana, what have we done since Gagisbeck time in the railway business? Very little. Some, Chance Kotoku was done by Asiedu-Dartey, but a very short period. But to do railway as envisaged in our manifesto requires a whole minister with even deputies to get it done and done properly. So I don't think the number, you must always also think about the crusade of the president. The president's objective to transform the economy. And he needs people to work with. He needs people to be assigned specific jobs. And sometimes not too much to do this, what he's done. He's got 36, and I think it's okay. And the Constitution allows him to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, my second question. Projects, and for that matter, development, are tied to revenue generation. I've heard you again that your interest is to look at those loopholes that are making it easy for people to evade taxes and all that, so that what you are expected to rake in can be harnessed. Can you share with us, with this committee? I mean, trying to block these loopholes need a strong fight and motivation by the tax collectors. Can you share with this committee how are you going to coordinate this thing to make sure these loopholes are blocked so that we're raking the needed revenue for developmental purposes? Thank you.
Chairman, I've received a number of memoranda, the transition team, about loopholes in the revenue. I'm shocked about some of the revelations I'm getting. People snip them even under my door in the house. They wake up and there are memos, letters in the door of my house. And people are pointing out to me some of the loopholes in the system. Some arising out of collusion, some arising out of misclassification of the items, some arising out of just sheer wrong valuation and that kind of thing. We're losing a lot of revenue through these things, and it cannot continue. You may recall that during the MPP time, we took off the revenue agency's salary from the payroll and gave them a 3% of what they collect. I don't know whether you may collect. That's what I brought in as a Minister of Finance. So look, let's talk about people being rewarded through efforts. Let's have, so get 3% of your revenue. And it was working because when we introduced it the first time, salaries of revenue personnel went up about 25% what they would have obtained if they were. And any time we are negotiating, we refuse negotiations. Look, if you are able to improve, if you double your revenue, you will double your salary. So what are you talking about negotiation? And I think we should be looking at this type of arrangement for our revenue people so that we improve on our revenue. There are just too many loopholes. And the transition team, not only myself, but we have papers and papers brought to us even by the revenue officers themselves about loopholes. And I think it's an area we are going to look at and try to improve. Sometimes you plug the loopholes with technology. You remove human beings from it. And therefore, it's very complicated. You've got to sit at it, learn the best practices from other countries. You don't have to invent a wheel. Other countries are maximizing revenue through technology by removing the human elements. I think you have to be going in that direction to make sure that we maximize our revenue. And it's going to be my dream to push that agenda.
Mr. Chairman, my final question.
Hold on there. Ranking member wants to ask that.
Yeah, Chairman, I have an objection to raise as to how the minister designate address the president. I heard him in one of his submissions say, Nana Akufo-Addo way. Familiarity, they say, breeds contempt. This sitting has been observed by school children and Ghanaian public alike. You ought to give the president his respect since you intend to drink from his fountain of honor. May you retract and address him accordingly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will draw an address by His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Thank you very much for bringing this to my attention.
Okay, Honorable Tatis Glover, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hon.Osarfo, you just share with us that the growth of this oil economy currently is less than 4%. This brings to mind in 2001, January 7th, when MPP came to office. It was almost the same time, 3.7%. Then you took us to HIPIC and brought us out. And you gave us a good percentage of 8.4%. In dollar terms from...
It was adjusted to 9.1 for end of 2008.
Thank you very much for the correction. Then in dollar terms from, I think, $4 billion to $16 billion and rebasing to about $32 billion. Now looking at the level in which we are now, with the experience you have and the team you're going to work with, can you confidently say it is feasible to transform this economy, looking at the high expectation that Ghanaians have out there? Thank you.
I had said on several occasions that Ghana's economy is fundamentally very strong. We have very reliable sources of inflow. I take economy as made up of inflow and outflow. And like every human being, if your outflow exceeds your inflow, you get into debt. Now, our sources of inflow are very reliable, reasonably solid. And for our population size, Ghana economy is fundamentally strong. What is left is the management of the resources to get the maximum out of it. Because, you see, the moment you finance everything in certain proportion through loans, then the cost of servicing these loans creates a problem for you. Now today, the cost of servicing our debt is about 7% of GDP. So if you are growing at 3.54% and the cost of servicing your debt is 7% of GDP, you have a problem. And the first area you look at is your debt profile. When we said we'll restore the nurses' allowance, teachers' allowance, people were howling. The teachers' and nurses' allowance is 0.1% of GDP. Is 0.1% of GDP. And therefore, if you negotiate even your interest on loans, and you bring it from 7% of GDP to 6% of GDP, or to 5% of GDP, you can more than pay those allowances. So it's insignificant in terms of a ratio of GDP. So I think we need to look at these things with some analytical eyes and make sure that we continue to push the economy in the right direction. Economy is fundamentally strong, and with discipline, particularly in the outflow, and I am emphasizing it, I mean expenditure. If something is to cost you 10 and you pay 20 for it, obviously you are creating a problem for the economy. So we must make sure that we are managing this in a very holistic manner, because the economy is strong. Our population is about 25, 26, 27%. It's a good population to work with. And Ghana can really run rather than crawling in the economic development.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have some representation from my constituency relating to this senior minister thing. That's why I raised my hand for a follow-up. So if you'll be gracious enough.
You have three opportunities. Please use them.
This is of public interest here. Yes. Yes. Honorable Osarfo Marfo, congratulations. As part of your remit as a senior minister, did His Excellency Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo say you could fire and hire colleague ministers?
Thank you very much for this question. I will rather answer it from this angle. People have equated this senior minister position to that of a prime minister in the press and in the media, and it really baffles me. It really baffles me because there is no relationship. There are two types of prime ministers we know of in the world, that I know of in the world. The first is the British parliamentary system, where there is election between political parties. The party that wins the election, the majority leader becomes the prime minister, and he appoints his ministers and call them the frontliners, and his primus inter pares. They all sit on the front bench, in the green benches, and the one who leads them and becomes the prime minister. The rest are ministers. He appoints. His authority is to appoint the ministers.
Honorable Nominee, I think it's sufficient. We have understood you. Please, he has answered. He doesn't have that authority. The Constitution is very clear. Let's not waste time on that. Please, Honorable Atacha, proceed with your second
Chairman,
question.
thank you for helping those in my constituency to understand these concepts here. Now, Honorable Osarfo, you mentioned the Bank for Housing and Construction and how you became the managing director of that bank. If you know the serious challenge of the housing deficit, one of the problems we are facing is financing, mortgage arrangements. What, in your view, was the strength of the Bank for Housing and Construction, and how that strength is not aided us in the area of mortgage financing?
Thank you very much. I think it is a pity that the system allowed the Bank for Housing and Construction to collapse. And those who were in Parliament then, I left it 8 years before it collapsed. I gave a very emotional statement on the floor of the House on that day, because I think carefully, and I told the World Bank that they misled the whole country, because the reasons assigned for the collapse of that bank were not tenable. But it's gone, and we had agreed and it's gone, so I don't think we was spilled milk. We need a bank that can provide medium to long-term funds to make the housing industry work. You can't use commercial bank funds, these are short-term funds, to support housing. And therefore, we have to think through this again and see the best way forward. The most important thing is you need a bank that can provide long-term source of funding, because mortgage financing is not medium, it's long-term. People should be paying between 10 to 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned that there's a necessity to review the IMF package because of issues of physical space. Are you implying that the Mahama administration did not take that into account? And what kind of negotiations are you going to do to change that fundamental problem you're talking about, physical space to function as economy?
Well, Honorable Mr. Chairman, I think the NDC government did its best to negotiate with them in respect of their policy, and you can't fault them with it. Now, we have a policy where we're talking about making, for instance, $1 million available to every constituency. You need that fiscal space to make it workable. If you have a situation where your excess funding is almost zero, then we cannot implement our manifesto. So we're going to sit down with the fund, look at the figures, and see what we can do to create room for ourselves. And I think they will be sympathetic, because they know there is a change of government, and they know the new government has new programs, and these programs must be factored into the negotiations. I mean, I don't know whether you heard President-elect Trump say, he said the Chinese agreement, he said, without it, say, I was going to abrogate it on his first day of assuming office, because it was a bad trade agreement. He's saying so in respect of the Republicans' window of trade business, you know. So when there's a change of political direction, there must be changes as well of some of these things, because you must have things to be able to implement your policies. And I think, as I said, the fund will themselves request for a review. If they don't, we will insist and make sure that we review. The program is for 3 years, from 15 to 18 April. And so it has got about a year to lapse. We will look at it and see how best it will satisfy both sides. We need the fund ongoing, at least for international image. We can't talk about abrogating the IMF program. No, you can't. It's ongoing. It's already been signed on. We have to follow, but we must follow it based on our terms to some extent. so that we can have this fiscal space.
My last question.
No, you're done. Honorable Abuja, please.
Chairman, I've asked only 2 questions.
Honorable Kujeto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Honorable Osarfo Marfo. My first question will be a follow-up to the earlier discussion on an economic development plan for our country. You seem to argue that, in your opinion, we should not have a development plan beyond 10 years. And in responding to the majority leader, you agree with him that since the architecture of the NDPC is tied to government, and a government is voted for a 4-year tenure, to go with that logic, my contention, therefore, will be that that logic defeats your 10-year argument as well. That the maximum a president can get is 8 years if you are successful in an election, in a re-election bid. So then we should not be going beyond 8 years. Other countries have been able to chart a development path that all the political parties within those jurisdictions agree that, as for these matters, is the national interest. And so regardless of being center of left, center of right, being socialist, capitalist, on these matters, this is our agreement, this is our vision for our country, and so we pursue it. It can be 20 years, 30 years, some have even done 50-year development plans. Why can't we do that, regardless of the partisanship and the 4-year tenure? So I want us to revisit that matter and to submit to you that the 10-year argument you put forward is defeated by your own explanation by 4 years, as in tying it to the tenure of a government.
Honorable Kujeto Ablaka, if you want to make a statement on the floor, I'm sure the Speaker will give you an opportunity. But can you ask your question? So
it is a question. That's the question. No, that's the question. The question, he says that in his view, development planning should not go beyond 10 years. And the reason he gives is because of the limited time of 4 years for a government. The maximum a government can get, as we all know, is 8 years. So doesn't that defeat his point? That's my question.
In fact, the reasons I gave were more than that. I started by saying that even technology makes some of these long-term plans, 40 years, irrelevant. Because some of the things you think you can do, the money required to be done, because of technology, the whole thing changes. I started along those lines. Now, 10 years is larger. So far, the history of this country, politics tell us that political parties come in on the average of 8 years. Nobody has done less than that as a political party. 8 years is close enough to 10 years. And therefore, if you are extending it by a quarter, you are within the remit of the political parties. And therefore, the 10-year is justified along those lines and supports the position of the majority leader. But I still will say that, see, and I'm happy you use the word, certain areas, but that is not then the development plan. If we agree that on railway, we need a 15, 20-year program, I have no problem with that. Then you are being very specific on a specific infrastructure. But to talk about a total plan of the country for 40 years is too much for me to swallow.
My second question, Mr. Chairman, has to do with the record of the nominee. Without a doubt, the Honorable Osarfo Marfo has paid his due to this country. He served this country very, very well, and he's an inspiration to many of us. However, during his tenure as Minister for Finance and Minister for Education, there were some issues that came up. You were rocked with a few scandals that Ghanaians will want to hear you on. At the Ministry of Finance, there was an IFC loan, there was a CNTCI loan, whose address turned out to be the address of a hairdressing salon in the United Kingdom. I hold in my hands here the Hansard of 30th June 2004, And that is the latest record of this matter in this House, where a motion of rescission was filed by the then minority leader, Honorable Alban S.K. Bagbin, and seconded by his deputy, Honorable Doa Jaho, who later became Speaker of this House. You objected to it, and in column 887, you said, Mr. Speaker, I think this motion for the House to rescind its decision must not only be rejected, but be rejected with contempt. Some 13 years on, CNTCI never materialized. Will you use this opportunity to clear the air on this matter? When you went to the Ministry of Education as well, the Daily Dispatch reported on the 18th of October 2005 about a Macmillan textbook scandal. It's an alarm blow over 256 billion CD contract. In the story, it is alleged that you had signed an agreement with Macmillan on July 29th.
Honorable Member, is the only source the newspaper?
I have other sources if you want.
Well, the newspaper is not, unless it's been tendered in this House. Otherwise, if you have other sources that are acceptable, please go. Daily Dispatch, please. That is not an acceptable source here. If you have any other source which is acceptable, please speak
Mr. Speaker, are you, Mr. Chairman, are you suggesting that newspapers are no longer accepted in this House?
If you're going, then you have to tender it.
Yes, I can tender it. I have it here.
Which one, the newspaper?
Yes.
Yes, please. Can I?
Yes. It's after reading it, 18 October 2005. Alarm blow over
please, can I?
256 billion.
You tender it through the chairman. Can I see it, please?
Before I proceed, is that,
Honorable
is that the direction?
You tender.
Okay. So that is fine.
Before you make your arguments
fine.
in that respect, respectfully.
Can I proceed? The chairman, he can answer the question relating to the Hansard. Then whilst after that. Very well.
Yeah, so can I finish then? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully, I don't think this is a newspaper. This certainly is not a newspaper. There is a photocopy of something, but I'll plead for whatever it's worth. Let's listen to the question.
Chairman, we should not use this opportunity to question the credibility of what Ghanaian newspaper you to test the fidelity of that publication you otherwise stated.
Mr. Chairman, what I have before me, honourable members, is a photocopy. Now, when you present the photocopy, its authenticity would always be in question. And we cannot submit this and say it is a newspaper. However, the nominee has indicated a desire to respond to the issue. And for the benefit of the record, I will allow the question.
And I can also produce the newspaper. That's just from a newspaper from the library.
Question, please.
From the library. So I can produce the original newspaper if you so wish. So my question, Mr. Chairman, has to do with these scandals that rocked the nominee when he served as minister. I would want to know from the nominee how he responds to IFC, to CNTCI, and to the Macmillan issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you were too young at the time to read the matter, because I read a press.
Honorable nominee,
yes.
That is not an acceptable.
Okay.
Kindly withdraw.
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw that statement.
Thank you.
With apology. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, a press conference was held on this matter. This is why, and he should have also brought in the press conference which answered these very questions. And you don't put it in the middle and try to make a gain out of it. That's why I'm saying that perhaps he didn't hear the press conference. There was a press conference on the Macmillan. There was a press conference, detailed press conference, also on the ICITI and then the IFC. If you are in the Ministry of Finance, you get inundated with people trying to give you credit lines. When you get that type of letter, there are certain steps you take. You first of all request for a confidential report for Dun & Bradstreet, which is a source Ghana ascribed to for information about what you have received, somebody wanting to give you a loan. Now, the Dun & Bradstreet report we had on IFC were positive. Barclays did it on our behalf. We were looking for long-term funds, and they were ready to give us long-term funds. So we started dealing with them. But they were brought to our attention by very senior members of the government. Now, along the line, we insisted, or I insisted, that we wanted to know the bank where the money which intend to give us kept, located, what you call a location report, so that our bankers are XYZ. You wouldn't tell us your balance, but there should be evidence that you have the financial muscle to provide that type of loan over that period. We then had difficulty getting that confirmation on location and period. I came to Parliament, on the floor of Parliament, and the records are also there, to say that in view of the difficulty we are getting on the location and the financial muscle of this thing, even though we had positive report from Dun & Bradstreet, we were withdrawing that whole application. So we withdrew it. Now on Macmillan, there are two sources of book supply to Ghana, Macmillan and Longmans. We, depending on which range of the school textbooks you are dealing with, one is stronger than the other. Some of them, Macmillan supply more the basic, the primary ones, than Longmans, and vice versa. Now, when we were tendered for this, we sought the opinion of the NAT on the books and found out that 68% of the books, the range that we're talking about, were supplied by Macmillan. And therefore, if you are making a choice between Longmans and Macmillan, your choice is Macmillan. So we recommended and wrote a copious memo to the tender board for sole sourcing and then the procurement center. Now, this article which came was very mischievous. It was mischievous. I answered it, of course. At that time, if anybody paid attention, it was mischievous because the very day that we got the approval from the procurement board that we could sole source because of the rationalization that we have put up from Macmillan, we had in the morning this article appearing in the Daily Dispatch. And Mr. Chairman, it's important to note that I never then pursue even that whole tender. We never bought a single book for Macmillan. So any view that anybody holds that we bought, and you've been to that ministry, and you should find out, because you have that connection, whether under Hon.Osarfo as minister, we bought a single book from Macmillan. No, we did not. Because I found out that there were intrigues to create problem in the whole industry, and I prefer keep my honor than so I refused to carry out the tender, and we didn't buy anything from Macmillan. So as far as I'm concerned, it is that kind of, call it, I don't know what word to use, but people tend to be mischievous. And demonization on things which are frivolous. It is frivolous. Somebody who originally supplied books to the ministry has done it for years. And for the range that we're looking for, they supply 68% of it. If we are talking about sole sourcing, you'll be justified to give them because then you can negotiate even the price down. Then you say the headline was a deal, Macmillan deal or something was the billion. Even the figure he brought up, nobody knows. And out to today, I never bought a single book from Macmillan under that arrangements. So I have, as far as I'm concerned, was no scandal. It was a propaganda which worked for them because once you carry out that headline, people will speak on it from different angles in the newspapers and it tends to stick. But no book was ever bought from Macmillan. So that's when it was spurious and not right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the mic. My third question has to be from the honorable nominee's CV. And I noticed that from the CV presented to this committee, the honorable nominee's last employment, if you look at page 2, employment history, 2006 to 2010, senior consultant, consultancy management enterprise, CME.
But the World Bank was a little bit worried about Ghana's problem of and declining to about 3%. They were a little bit alarmed about certain things and wanted Governor Akwa and myself, who had led this growth, to get involved in discussions in East Africa. So I did that. I also was given an assignment by the World Bank to do some work in Liberia on budgeting with the Liberian system and government. A major problem we have in Ghana is budgeting, scrutinizing budget. And I think if you know the American system, the American Congress has its budget department, which is bigger than even the Treasury. So that in the budget that comes, they are in-house in a position to analyze and say yes or no based on their own research. Liberia, being a product of America, has a similar arrangements, and they brought me in to strengthen the budgeting division of this thing. So I kept on working with them. So, but it's off and on, it's not continuous. And basically, I'm a farmer as well. I spend a lot of my time on farms. Thank you.
Honorable Samsahi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Article 66 of the 1992 Constitution, 66, talks about term of office of president. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I read, that's 66.1. A person elected as president shall, subject to clause 3 of this article, hold office for a term of 4 years, beginning from the date on which he is sworn in as president. Which means that if a president is elected, he has 4 years to implement his programs and policies until a new president assumes office. After the elections, the Afghan government undertook some appointments, did some appointments, and awarded some contracts. And the transitional team, led by the honorable nominee, had problems with that. I want to find out from the honorable nominee whether the Afghan government did something wrong constitutionally, which is why they came out to say that they reserve the right to review appointments and contracts done by the Afghan government.
Yes, Mr. Marfo.
Chairman, I think when the transitional team was formed, the former chief of staff and myself, who were the joint chairman of the transitional team, agreed on some ground rules. We didn't want we wanted some peace and very smooth transition to take place. So we decided to do some ground rules among ourselves. And we decided that, you see, there should be, for instance, no employment immediately after the president has been declared, while the president is in waiting. There should be no procurement, etc., etc. And I reduced this into writing to him. We kept on hearing of these things going on, that people were employing, people were procuring, and those kind of things, which created some problem for our side of the transition team. But we really didn't want to shout over these things because we still wanted a very smooth transition team. But naturally, these things can be and should be reviewed as a matter of course. We have a payroll for every department and every sector institution in this country. So if I'm appointed a new minister and your payroll, you are not on the payroll till December, the day of the election, and you're going to appear on the payroll for January, when were you engaged in that particular thing? You are going to create a problem. The minister is likely to say that all those who were not on the payroll by a particular date, I would do away with their services. I can see it happening. Of course, if they have also been engaged long ago and they were just resuming for whatever reason, there will be time to rationalize. But certainly, procurement done after 7th of December in certain cases will have to be justified in terms of when it was commenced, where it has reached, and that kind of thing. I had the occasion on more than 7 occasions to stop auctioning of vehicles and that kind of thing. I had agreed with my co-chairman that ministers who have used cars for more than 2 years could buy it, and even went further to even reduce it further by 30%, because that is within the rules. And we would try to be as nice as possible. But if, despite all these niceties, people decided to do things that will create problem for us, I consider it unfair. But not until the people are out, you can't see what is gone wrong. So my transition members were putting pressure on me to do ABC. I said, no, let's have a very smooth transition. Let's take time to look at these things and also do what is right, what we can explain to the Ghanaian public. Like if names appear on the payroll after December, we definitely will lay them off quietly. If certain procurements have been carried out on the very day, then we're going to, yes? Then, because why would you employ after, in fact, the American system, Mr. Chairman, the word lame duck president comes out of the American system. From August up to the time the next president is sworn in, nothing happens in the US in terms of procurement, in terms of this, which has not been done before. But I think when you get to the bridge, you cross it.
Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the nominee couldn't tell whether the Afghan government did anything constitutionally wrong. But he says they will, if they have to terminate people who have been duly appointed or employed, they will do so. My second question is, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Please hold on, please, Mr. Chairman, a moment. I think I ignored the latter part of his question. I want to answer it, please. Whether we did anything constitutionally wrong, and the answer is yes. Under the Transition Act, you know, Act 212845, it is very clear that handing over notes should be given to the Administrator General a month in advance. So when you come to power, you just go there and pick them. On Sunday when we were inaugurated, the 9th, and we requested for them because they should have been handed over a month earlier. There was nothing to hand over to us. They pleaded for Monday. Monday, when we met, out of about 39 reports, we had 8. Then they pleaded for Wednesday. This, of course, complete breach of the Transitional Act. But because you talk about constitutional breach, that's why I'm taking you. There were a lot of breaches along the line of the Act. Well, the breach of the Transition Act. Yes.
Thank you,
We're talking
Mr.
about
Nominee.
Constitution.
Please,
But how
Mr.
can the
Nominee,
Transition
don't
Act-
engage in any exchanges. Can you please ask your second question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, page 17 of MPP Manifesto, 2016, talks about reducing, page 17, reducing the corporate tax rate from 25 to 20%, abolishing the special import levy, abolishing the 17.5% VAT on imported medicines not produced in the country, abolishing the 17.5% VAT on financial services, abolishing the 5% VAT on real estate sales, abolishing the 17.5% VAT on domestic airline tickets. Then when it goes to page 18, they will seek to broaden tax base as a result of formalization of the economy. After abolishing a lot of the tax components, we are seeking to broaden the tax base. Can the nominee tell us the areas which they are seeking to broaden the tax to cover so that Ghanaians can prepare for to pay for those taxes yet to be introduced? Can he be specific on some areas where they will impose taxes on? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when you talk about broadening tax base, it means that instead of taxing 100 people, you'll be looking for 150. You are taking steps to broaden. Now, if you reduce from 25 to 20, the consequential report could be many more people voluntarily coming in to pay tax who have been dodging. So that will broaden the tax base. Now, that could broaden. Now, let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. Mr. Ahi, when you talk about reducing the VAT on micro and small scale from 17.5 to 3, you would definitely broaden the base because a lot more people who were dodging the 17.5 will come in and pay the 3. That's what we mean by broadening. You are going to, more people will come in. So that's what will happen. And look, we have a serious housing deficit. Why would you be taxing 5% on real estate? We think that it becomes a nuisance tax in respect of housing. So you remove it. And more people will put up and you solve another problem of housing. When you broaden, you are bringing more people into the tax net. That's what we mean by broadening. Mr. Honorable Member, you are just asking more people to come into the tax net. That's what we mean. You bring it down, more people come into the net. And that is broadening. We are not talking about increasing. You bring more people in.
Mr. Chairman, I think the nominee did not understand my question.
Honorable Samson,
Mr. Chairman, please.
Can you listen to me, please? You asked him a question. He has answered. You have one more opportunity. Please go ahead.
This is not fair. This is not fair. This is not fair. It's not fair. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, last year we were all together doing vetting, and anyway. Mr. Chairman, the honorable nominee told us that as a senior minister, he's been asked to coordinate the economic ministry. Yes, ministries. We'll have a ministry for planning. We have ministry for monitoring and evaluation. Mr. Chairman, I want to find out from the honorable nominee whether these portfolios are not going to contradict themselves and not duplicate their functions.
If we may get a clarification, the nominee said that he is to coordinate the economic sector. That is not the same as monitoring and evaluation ministry. Yes, ministries is only a small sector of the entire. Hello? Can you give us some order, please?
But you're also contradicting what he said, so we can't keep quiet and allow you to say it. That is a fact. You let him answer or you overrule it, but you don't go answering. Well, you're also trying to answer.
If leadership would not respect the chair, we may probably cede chairmanship to you.
No, the chair must
please.
Respect himself. The chair will have to respect himself. He must answer the question.
What is this for?
Mr. Chairman, may I appeal to colleagues that when we meet at a committee level, you should abide by the spirit of consensus. And it's not nice to be throwing jibes here and there. It is not. It is not. And I thought that the question that was being asked by my colleague, the Honorable Ahi, is germane, except to say that when he premised his question on the fact that there are certain ministries and refers to monitoring and evaluation, there's no ministry like that. You would say that maybe there is a minister in charge. It doesn't necessarily mean that a ministry has been created. So if you could premise the question well, then maybe the nominee could answer.
Can the nominee clarify where his coordination is for the benefit of members and the questioner, please?
Mr. Chairman, I think you got me right. When I talked on several occasions about economic ministries, coordinating the work of economic ministries. If there is a minister for coordinating and evaluation, assuming we want to follow up on our one district, one factory, and somebody should follow and give report to the president, that would be there. That's different from my coordination of the economic ministries. Very different. So there's no crossing.
Now, would you want to continue? Please review your question so that nominee will answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the honorable nominee told us that he's been asked to coordinate the economic ministries. Now, we have a minister of state in charge of planning, which is part of economic activities in the country. And I want to find out from the nominee what would be the relationship between his role and these ministers of state who are going to be in charge of monitoring and evaluation and planning. Is that not going to be a duplication of functions? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think earlier on when you talk about planning, it's talking about planning for the whole economy, not only the economic ministries. I will restrict myself in the coordination with economic ministries. We talk about planning, and the planning is the only ministry which also defined in detail in the Constitution. But there are many people who are arguing that planning is a super minister, because everybody takes his feed from it. And therefore, there will be no overlapping as far as I'm concerned. Evaluation and monitoring of what? Of projects which will be assigned to him by the presidency. And I think we wait till we get there. Thank you.
We'll come back to my left. Honorable Netu, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would just congratulate the nominee, and for reasons obvious to all Ghanaians, recuse myself or ask permission not to ask a question. Thank you. For today, only today. Tomorrow, I'll be sitting here to ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are very simple ones. The first one is, what will be the relationship between his coordination of the economic ministries and the economic management team that is headed by the Vice President? I mean, some people are worried that this seeming confusion about roles will be in itself a problem in managing your economy. What do you say about that?
Thank you very much. For the economic management team has met already 4 times. The first 3 under the chairmanship of the president himself, and the next one under the chairmanship of the vice president. And we define our terms of reference very well. And so far, there is no problem between the role of the Economic Management Committee. I report to them in respect of findings, because as much as possible, we want consensus. The Economic Management team has even people who are not even ministers on it. It's not only internal. There are people we have invited from outside to serve on it. And we are looking at the totality of the economy and other important, like infrastructure, and how to treat certain things. So I would say, so far, it's doing very well. There's no problem.
Chairman, sorry, Honorable Osarfo Marfo, just as a follow-up, economic management team have met 4 times.
Yes.
Who were the members of that EMT, and when did they meet? Can you just share with us who met as economic management team?
Yes, Mr. Zava.
I would say that the first meeting was held on the second day when we came to power, because the president was so keen about us understanding our roles and understanding the data that we should look for in managing the economy. And we invited then the Minister for Agriculture, the Minister for Trade and Industry, oh, not the Minister designate for Agriculture, sorry, designate for Trade and Industry, myself, Finance, the Vice President, and 2 other people from outside who were brought in by His Excellency the Vice President from his office to assist. And then later, we also brought in a 3rd person also to assist. So it's okay.
Very well. Honorable Yelecha, continue.
Mr. Chairman, the way he has talked, I think it was a proposed management economic management, not actual, because they are designating. But you see, let's go back to his designation as senior minister, because the Constitution says Minister of State. And then the president asks you the portfolio. So, wait, I'm coming to the point. You see, for me, I would have preferred where you don't precede the minister with a senior. Because we all know, when you enter any office, you ask for the senior person there. And having worked with the IMF and World Bank, he knows. when they say senior manager, they mean somebody higher than the other managers. So for me, to say that you are the same and you don't have other powers, the word senior itself implies power and authority, higher than that. So I believe that if the president really didn't want us to create a confusion in the constitution, with the constitution, what we should be talking about, Minister of State for coordinating economic ministries. Because some of the ministries he has created are Marfo, inner cities and zongos. So that, to me, would have solved this problem. But to say senior doesn't mean anything, but that you are co-equal, I don't believe that. How do you see it?
Well, I don't think there's a question in it. So thank you for your opinion. Can you proceed to ask another question, please? He has answered that question earlier, explaining the co-equal position. What your view is shared here. But please proceed to ask the question so we can.
View. This is not my view. I want him to comment on the issues I have raised.
So, ask the question.
Yes, that's the question. Now, as one to coordinate these ministries, you have planning, you have monitoring, evaluation. All these are part of managing the economy. Don't you think there are too many actors in the economic front? And what do you...
I don't think so. The view of the president is that he needs that coordination, and he chooses to call the one who coordinates the senior minister. Period.
Yes, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By way of introduction, I'm Jato Michael, MP for Krachi East. I didn't introduce myself. Mr. Senior Minister, congratulations. I want to ask, we have a lot of statutory payment in arrears. Granted, the Minister for Finance refuses to, by the previous government, granted the Minister for Finance refuses to pay this when he assumes office. You as the coordinator, so to speak, the minister, what will be your role in making sure that these statutory payments are made?
Why do we have the statutory payment in arrears? They are in arrears because the liquidity is not there to pay, as of now. And therefore, there is a problem. It's a problem of liquidity. When the new minister comes, I cannot create liquidity when there is no liquidity. So I cannot just go and say pay, when indeed he has not got the financial muscle to pay. So we have to, because they are statutory, this has happened before, we've got to try to improve on our revenue performance, reduce certain expenditures, and settle the statutory payment, because they are statutory. And I believe that we must respect the statutory payments. It's a must. But at the moment, they are in arrears because your cash flow is poor. We have to improve the cash flow and get them sorted out. And that will be done by the Minister for Finance when it's approved.
Your next question.
Thank you very much. Your CV tells me that you are an engineer by profession. And from 1967 to 69, you were in charge of process and quality control of the VALCO. Now you are going to control the, coordinate the economic sectors of this government. Will you tell us what you do in making sure that VALCO comes to life?
I think VALCO's problem is power. It's availability of power for them to come to power. I've not studied it in depth what we should do, but when we get the bridge, we'll cross it. But it will be my wish that VALCO operates. We need VALCO because we need to push the aluminum integrated project concept. We have a lot of bauxite, and we must go back and integrate it by converting our bauxite into alumina to enable VACO use our produced alumina to do the aluminum. So it's an integration the government has mentioned in the manifesto, and therefore VACO will be encouraged to operate. We have to find ourselves the power, and I think we'll do it. Thank you.
I'm left with the last one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, coming from Volta region, we're talking about the growth of the economy. And the growth of the yes, the question is coming from Volta region. It's about the growth of the economy, and it's a holistic, in a holistic approach. We know that Volta region is under resourced in terms of industrial development. How do you whip all the sectors to make sure that at least Volta region also see a fair growth in terms of industrial development?
Thank you very much. There are two things which we introduce in our manifesto, which is going to have some equity and equilibrium. When you're talking about one district, one factory, then every district in the country, including those in the Volta region, will benefit from it. When we talk about $1 million per constituency, it is also the same. And this is meant to enable those in the Volta region to also decide on how to apply it. So I would say that we're trying to make sure that there is uniformity in the development. And therefore, this is a very good startup, and we should all push it to bring those behind into the center. So Volta will get its fair share based on these policies of ours.
Thank you. Honorable Matthew Paguprempe.
Let it pass.
Honorable Esla Osu.
I have just one question.
The question is that, sir.
May I congratulate the Honorable Osarfo Marfo, who happens to be my uncle, for... Oh.
Let it pass.
I am just asking a simple question, please. Yes.
Are you for it, sir?
Yes, I am. I noticed from your CV that you don't say anything about what other role you may have occupied as a traditional ruler. So I'd like to know if you were ever a traditional ruler, because I don't see it on your CV.
You may recall that I abdicated to enable me contest elections as MP for Akimoda. So it's no more significant. That's why I didn't talk about it. But I was once a traditional ruler. I was once a chief.
Significant to those who you led. So I would have wished to see it.
Oh, okay. Next time I'll put it there.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Honorable Suhini.
Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, maybe let me just take it off from where Honorable Osla left off. Going through your CV, I noticed that after your first degree at the University of Science and Technology, where you had BSc in mechanical engineering, you never really bothered yourself to pursue any further degrees. But you have an impressive, working career. And maybe on another platform, I would want your guidance, especially as we have a lot of people now who even in offices sometimes rush out of their offices, to pursue other degrees. I will perhaps on another platform, I would like your guidance on that to help us. But to my substantive questions, first on the fact that you are to be coordinating the economic ministries. I noticed that an earlier question had to do with your role vis-a-vis the role of the economic management team. And given your record and record of other members such as Honorable Osayako and Kwame Penim in the past, as far as the history and record of the NPP administration is concerned, I was wondering what the role of the economic management team will be vis-a-vis your role, but I think you have touched on it. But still on the economy, you answered a question relating to fiscal space, and the fact that you will renegotiate the IMF deal to create, as you put it in your words, fiscal space. So my question to you is that an indication that your government, led by Nana Akufo-Addo, will be borrowing, President Nana Akufo-Addo will be borrowing more?
This is a very important question. Now, there is refinancing arrangement in managing an economy. If I owe 100 cedis and I'm to repay it in 3 years, if I'm able to get 100 cedis to be repaid in 10 years, to substitute, I create myself a fiscal space because the repayment schedule will be very different and I'll get extra money to spend because I have rearranged the debt. And therefore, our negotiation will go from many directions, including reborrowing to refinance. And reborrowing to refinance on better terms, better in terms of repayment period, in terms of
Chairman,
interest,
if you indulge
etc.
me, my question is a simple one, sorry. No, I just wanted to, because he wasn't answering the question, so I just wanted to draw your attention.
Honorable Member, the rule is that you permit the nominee to answer. You have 3 opportunities, so you can.
Okay. I just wanted to know if you'll be borrowing more. That's the question. If you will be borrowing more.
The question is that we'll be borrowing certainly, but under different arrangements. And I explain it, that you want to borrow to refinance such that you have room or space to operate. Because instead of paying a loan in 5 years, you are paid off that loan, but you have to repay the next one in 10 years. So there will be less cash outflow, and therefore you create fiscal space for yourself. Borrowing more, certainly, but differently. And you borrow to refinance, to change your whole debt profile. That's what you are seeking to do.
Thank you. To my second question. Honorable nominee, you have worked in government before, and this question has to do with management of state assets and the view of the public, especially when it comes to how politicians appropriate such assets. Now, I want your view, and this is especially important, like I stated, because you've worked in government before, you've managed state assets. And again, quite recently, there was a discussion of how the former president, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, was to be allowed to stay in his residence as his entitlement.
Honorable Member, our rules do not permit questions that elicit views and opinions.
Okay, so I'll rephrase. I'll rephrase.
Chairman,
okay.
Please, information.
Now,
Mr. Chairman.
The question is this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may supply some information, since the colleague is alluding to something that he was not party to. We agreed, the parliament of the previous parliament, the 6th parliament, agreed that the president from now on should be provided with a residence and an office. Parliament did not say that the residence that he's occupying now should be given to him. Please, let's make that distinction. No, please. The report, because that is premised on the committee that the president set up under Article 71 of the Constitution. Our parliament, in its wisdom, decided to amend the provisions contained in that. And nowhere did parliament say that the president, the former president, should be allowed to occupy the residence, the official residence that he's occupying. I think as a matter of record, we should state it. Nobody said so. That was what he said.
I did not make reference to parliament, And I am grateful.
Can you ask a question, please?
Now that's my second question, right, Mr. Chairman? Okay. No. The question is, I have before me the transition team report of 2009. And in it, there was supposed to be a government infilling scheme. And as part of that scheme, a number of government functionaries at the time benefited from the state lands. Your name is one of such beneficiaries. Again, I have before me a letter that was written by the former chief of staff. And in that letter, reference is made to you, the former chief of staff, the immediate former chief of staff, Mr. Julius Deborah. And in that letter, reference is made to you by name. And it had to do with a discussion that you had with that government, with the previous government or functionaries of the previous government on 19th December 2016 on where the former president was supposed to reside. So the question is, did this meeting take place? Did this agreement happen? And what is your view on the concern that the general public have expressed about how politicians appropriate state assets? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The presidential transition team works as a team. There's a joint chairman, that is the chief of staff, outgone chief of staff, and myself. He did speak to me about the wish of the president to take as his retirement benefit the house in which he was living. And I told him, when he's around, that this is a decision for the transitional team to make, not Osarfo Marfo. So he discussed with me. Nobody reached an agreement on the matter. And me personally, and I do not believe that people, not even at that level, but at even lower levels, should be given the chance to buy houses which they lived in, which are normally official houses. Because, like where Kwesibochwe lived, Kwamprepra lived, I also lived. Even though them was allowed to buy, I wouldn't have a place to live. So I think that the whole idea of having houses designated for certain positions in the system should be maintained and should not be allowed for people to buy off. Yes, did it. And
he didn't talk about his benefits, the fact that he's a beneficiary.
The plot, yes. A plot of land, yes, I was given. In fact, I was invited, interestingly, I was invited by the Commissioner for Lands. He said a list had been submitted to him for info. My name was not on it. And as a former Minister of Finance, I was entitled to such a benefit. And a plot of land, and he reduced this into writing. And therefore, when you came to Kawa, they even went further to write to me to confirm that particular plot of land. So it's quite interesting. And I will produce that to you, signed by Mr. Odame. Thank you.
My last question. Thank you very much. I noticed that when Madam Oslaosu talked about the fact that you were a chief before, she said so with pride because you are an uncle. That tells me that despite the fact that you are, like myself, a proud Ghanaian, you're also very proud of your cultural heritage. Now, given the fact that some questions on the floor have been asked, here have been asked based on discussions conducted on social media and the traditional media, I wish to find out from you if it is correct that you are on record without your knowledge to have suggested that the management of this country's resources should be put in the hands of those who come from 5 rich resource regions. And it is unfair for anyone who does not come from any of these 5 regions to be made responsible for managing the resources of this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is one of these distorted paste and cast statements. I am the chairman of the Council of Elders of the NPP in the Eastern region. We're fighting this election on the economy. And I was giving series of lectures on the economy and to various groups within the region. When it got to the turn of the Council of Elders, me, the chairman, the regional chairman spoke, Honorable Hackman spoke, I spoke, and I spoke on the economy. Now, you don't talk about the economy by starting with the resource location. I started with, I'm just telling you how the thing was distorted and put out of context. I started by talking about how poorly this economy has managed, that we have gone from 9.4 billion debt to 110 billion debt at the time, and how growth without oil was 9.1 billion and has dwindled to about 4%, and etc., etc., etc. And I said something which I had said in this room, that Ghana is not poor, and that the resource base of this country is found in 5 regions. And I mentioned the regions specifically. I was making a strong economic argument. Now, people removed all that I had said about the poor management of the economy, and then make it look like I started by talking about the sources of the location of this thing, and push it forward, and change certain things to make me look like I was being a travelist. I mean, and it was bad. This is why I find people very mischievous. When I'm talking about the economy, I'll start talking about where the resources are. Does it make sense when you're talking about the economy? Talk about performance of the economy first. You talk about the causes of the poor management before you say, look, we are strong and we have the full resources located this way. But if you take all the top part, you take the whole thing out of context and make it look very bad, travelistic. So I think, yes, it happened. Newspapers reported something wrong, and I think people should be ashamed of themselves when they do this kind of cut and paste to create the wrong impression in the system. They should have brought out what I said about the mismanagement of the economy, because that was going seriously against other people. Nobody talked about it.
Honorable Member for Efia.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable Minister Designate, I have taken care and pain really to look at your CV, and I can see you struggling to compress your achievement into a 5-pager CV because it's so obvious. It's so obvious you've done so much. My summary of your CV tells me your age and your profile exudes wisdom, and your I'm laying the background to my question. Your work, your KSC, knowledge, skill set, experience, really tells me of unexpected competence. And when it comes to your achievements, as outlined in the CV, I can see capability. And the issue about your role assignment.
Honorable Member, can you go to your question now?
Yes, please. I'm asking the question. The issue of your role assignment, that is coordinating a role, and the designation for the role, senior minister, has created a lot of discussion. In your view, is it a clear misunderstanding or not? Thank you.
Certainly. I think the emphasis of my role as a senior minister was to do with my experience and my past performance and the wisdom of His Excellency the President He wanted my experience to be on his economic management. And therefore, this should not be misunderstood. It is very clear in the mind of His Excellency the President that I have something to offer in terms of experience and exposure. There's no doubt about that. And I think we should give him that benefit and also allow us to continue to aid the whole country and the whole economy.
Mr. Chairman, my second question has to do with...
One moment, please. We are striving to close this by 1:30. Can I advise that members make their questions concise, please?
Mr. Chairman, my second question...
asked, please avoid repeating the questions.
Mr. Chairman, my second question is, Ghana is like at a crossroads at the moment, so far as debt levels is concerned. And looking at your CV, when you were Minister of Finance, from 2001 to 2004, you were actively involved in the debt restructuring of the country. At the moment, what current strategies do you bring to bear beyond the strategies that you used to restructure the debt then? What current strategies do we have?
Mr. Chairman, we are in completely different situations. In 2001, Ghana's per capita was $412. Today we are $1,400 and above. We are a lower middle income country. So the idea of going HIPIC to get your debt written off is no more applicable because we are not a poor country. We are a middle income country. So it's more difficult even now to look at this than then, because by just pronouncing HIPIC, we had 4,000 million US written off. Gives you a lot of fiscal space and therefore made things easy. We are not there. For your information, our debt to GDP ratio, which should normally be around 45–50%, is crossed the border of 70, which is taken as critical in any definition by IMF. We are 71.8%. This is critical because you should not exceed 70% in any debt restructuring. We are 71.8. The last figures from Bank of Ghana last week. And that problem is scary. As for the strategy, you need an inflow. We've got to make sure that we improve on our revenues as much as possible. We've got to make sure that things work better. We've got to make sure that we watch our expenditure, ensure that we have value for money in everything we do in this country from now going. It's so critical that anybody who does not go in for value for money, you know, in the big consumers, we cannot even afford to look after health and education. That's the way I see it. I get scared when I look at the figures. And so we have to be prudent, we've got to be strict, and whatnot. Thank you.
Okay. In your earlier submission, you talked about even financing the trainee allowance, next trainee allowance, when we reduce interest rates levels by even a percentage point. Do you extend the same argument to financing the campaign promise of $1 million allocation to constituencies? Do you extend the same argument to that?
It is not quite the same. Our capital budget is about $1.6 billion. Now, if we decide to give $1 million to each constituency, it means we are going to give $275 million out of it. So our capital budget will come down to the difference. It's not going to call for extra expenditure. What we are doing reallocation and giving the constituencies the chance and the initiative to determine certain levels of their development. That's not going to call for extra expenditure. We are going to take it from the capital expenditure to give out, and this will reduce the money to be used at the center. That will have to happen. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. May I use the opportunity to congratulate the nominee? My first question really borders on your loyalty to state vis-a-vis party. It is on record that when we had the Century Economic Summit, you were specifically invited to participate, but you didn't, maybe because of party affiliation. Today, that you are in a position to organize such summits and other fora on the economy of Ghana, how would you persuade other people from other political divides to join you? Indeed, maybe if you had participated in that summit and had brought on board your rich experience, some of the things you are talking about today would not have occurred. So how would you ensure that you will, or do you get the other? Mr. Chairman, I'm being disturbed, Mr. Chairman. And
I'm sorry, order, please.
Yes, I really want to know how he would convince us from the other political divides to join in growing the economy. That's my first question.
It is the method. See, earlier on, if you recall, Dr. Bawumia has submitted to you through a press conference certain things that should be done. People did not only refuse to do it, but they hailed insults on him to a level that was disgusting. And therefore, when we were invited as a group, people said, look, but the suggestions we have already put in the domain, people have refused. So what do you want us to come and say again? So there was a discussion. And because we have refused to take advice which had been given previously, people did not see the need to come and give more advice. That's because by going to Senche, it changes the position. Because we have put this in writing. And it appears that people have made up their mind already not to take it.
Okay. I'm not very satisfied, but I will take
Please
it.
ask another question.
Too many interjections. Mr. Chairman, my second question really borders on gender. We know that women constitute over 60% of the informal sector economy. Well, I go to Ghana.
Please ignore the interjections and proceed to them.
It's known, I mean, it's on record that if you go to all the documents, statistical data, and all, how would you ensure that the ministries that you're going to coordinate incorporate gender issues in their work? You know, sometimes we tend to overlook the importance of women in the economy. And I want to give the chance to you to give women the assurance that they will not be left out this time.
I think if you look at the 36 nominees of the president, the proportion who are women is impressive. And therefore, we take it from there that as a government, we are very sensitive about this. Whatever we can do to encourage women, to support women in the mainstream of economy, we have to do it. Because you said in the informal sector, women dominate. And if you want to bring the informal sector, which is in our constitution, that we want to encourage and draw the informal sector more into the formal sector. When you do that, you improve your taxation. We're going to do that, madam. There should be no problem.
Thank you very much for that assurance. My third question really is a light one, and it borders on age. We are all aging, and aging comes with sometimes wisdom, but also some challenges in our psychomotor activities, in our thinking, and all that. Looking at your age, at your CV, you are 74. about a couple of weeks ago, and by the end of by 2020, really, you'll be getting to 80, close to 80. Wouldn't you think, or didn't you think that taking a backstage as an advisor to the president in a more flexible manner would have been better than taking on a very demanding and hectic portfolio? You really need strength to climb stairs, go to meetings, and all that. So, excuse me, I need to finish my question, please. I haven't finished. So, can you assure us? It's just an assurance.
Order, please, order.
Yeah, don't you think that age will be a disadvantage to you at this time? We are all aging and we know what it means. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'm lucky in a way. I enjoy very good health as a person. And people wonder what the source of my, call it health and energy. And I think it's because of the food, the type of food I eat. Yes. Well, I can't tell you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
If you want to come and see me in chambers. But I think your advice is taken. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, my first question is, what specific policy initiatives would your outfit carry out, and through which ministry or ministries?
Since cash flow is a very big problem, our first area of call is the revenue. And we've already put a few things on paper and few changes to be made to ensure that we maximize our revenue. Because unemployment is also a major problem, we must concurrently be looking at the Minister of Industries. Already there's underutilization of capacities in this country with our industries. Some of the industries have literally closed down for lack of capital and that kind of thing. So we need to find some working capital and some long-term funds to push industry. For the transitional team reports were requested purposely to identify certain, I'll call it low-hanging apples, things that we can do immediately to ginger the economy. And we have picked them sector by sector, because you must always make sure that you go to examination you want to pass. I tell all my people, answer the easy questions first if you want to pass, and this is exactly what we are doing. But it's revenue, and we must put a lot of discipline in expenditure into the whole system. And I think if we do these things right, for the first 3 months, we begin to get some room for ourselves. We'll also negotiate even the compact, the Millennium Challenge contract. We are going to look at it. There are certain clauses in that Millennium Challenge account that we don't agree with. For instance, if we ask government to pay the total debt of the ECG, the Steel Company of Ghana, and give it to a concessionaire to run, the question is, then pay it and ask the Ghanaians to run it. Once you take the total debt, management becomes easy. They are in difficulty because of the debt overhang. Now you are forcing government to pay the total debt and give it to an outsider to run. It's something that we have to look at, and that is in the compact agreement. So there are some of the things we are looking at. We hope that, I believe, even though it has been approved by Congress, Trump looks so reasonable that he doesn't believe in agreements which are wrong. He will support it, because it's not fair that the government should find money to pay the total debt of ECG and bring somebody from outside to come and run it. Now, if you took the total debt of ECB and we found Ghanaians, good management to run it, it would be different, wouldn't it? Thank you.
Honorable Member, your Your second question.
My second question. Honorable nominee, from your CV and the languages spoken and written, you talked about English, Twi, and some knowledge of German. Yes. But I recall when you were the Minister of Finance, you signed the German debt relief agreement. And there was this controversy over the exact amount involved. While some were talking about 230 million euros, others were talking about 16.4 million euros. And in trying to clarify the issues, I recall vividly some statements you made on Joy FM to the effect that you could not read the document thoroughly. With this knowledge of German, what really happened?
I'm happy you have asked this question, because if you know protocol of agreements, here we are. It's very important. Here we are. Ghana owes Germany. Germany comes forward to say that I'm going to write off your debt. They write to us. Most countries, we exchange letters on the write-off, and that is the end. But Germans, they insist on an agreement, because their parliament insists on an agreement to show that they can take it off their books. Now, agreements, we have agreement with Germany. The official language to be used for the signing is German. We have it with the French. Official language to be used for signing is French. The English is by the side, it's not used. The figures in the agreement, we gave it to them, because the debt is on our books in the Ministry of Finance. When ministers of finance and House of State are to sign an agreement, the backroom job would have been done by the people. The figures, we send the figures there to be put in the agreement. On the day of signing of the agreement, it is komisch. The Germans will say, it is ridiculous for anybody who think that an agreement of 25 pages, which is writing off your debt to them, you will read it on the spot and sign. We don't do that. For heaven's sake, protocol demands that we just open the page for signing, you come ceremoniously to sign, because we had agreed on the figures earlier. So when people were talking about, why should I read that agreement in that room? That's not how it is done. People who did not understand any of this became pontificating what should have been done. And I myself said, I did not read. Why should I? I gave them the figures. The figures were picked in the Ministry of Finance, that the debt standing on our books, which we want to write off, is 45.8 million euro. And we have picked it from Bank of Ghana. So this whole idea of me reading English or German is irrelevant. Because we don't dare in any agreement, Mr. Chairman, read the agreement in the room before signing. We would have done all the job. And some pressmen just jump at it. So when people want to destroy in Ghana, it's very easy, because they try to say things which, between the falsehood and truth, looks close. Yes, I did not read it, but it is not necessary. It is never done that you read the agreement at the ceremony of signing. It's never done. The Minister of Finance comes together with the German Minister of Finance, signed with me. Did he read it? He never read it. He came and our agents showed us a dotted line. We signed, drank some coffee, off we go. So what this whole idea of signing this was quite, the Germans themselves say, you see, the German ambassador later called me. He said, this is komisch. You know komisch in German means? This is funny. Ghanaians are talking about you reading the agreement in the room before signing. For heaven's sake, that is never done.
Thank you, Mr. Nominee. Shall we proceed, please?
Your last.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My last question has to do with some emphatic statements you have made before the committee today. First, you said that you are going to review the IMF program or even renegotiate. And then you also talk about removal of some taxes. Looking at the position you are to occupy, senior minister, a coordinator, I strongly believe that this does not fall under your purview directly. It is the work of the Minister of Finance. Are you not going to usurp the powers of the minister because you have held this position before? Because looking at the way you're speaking as the Minister of Finance, but you are the coordinator.
Mr. Chairman, I think You are misunderstanding. We are talking about we. I was talking on behalf of the government. The government has taken a decision to review the IMF program. We took it 3 days ago, and I was part of that decision. So when I said we are going to review, Hon.Osarfo Marfo matter is the MPP government that's going to review. And when we say that we're not going to take this on board, it's we. No, we're talking about the government, because we have actually discussed it at the management and we've taken the decision. So I can say on authority that we have decided to review the IMF program. And I think they expect us to do it anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Nominee. I think you've adequately answered the question. Now, the 3 members of parliament on the majority side, I'll give you 1 question each, so we can stay within the 1.5 hours. Please start.
Mr. Chairman, if you can reduce it to 2. If you can make it 2 instead of 1. Because I'm entitled to 3 anyway. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Engineer Hon.Osarfo Marfo. That's what I see on your CV. And in fact, if it comes to the name, it's still Engineer Hon.Osarfo Marfo. Congrats for this nomination. And I have to put it on record that you are my former boss. You were the Minister for Education and Sports. On your CV, between 2001 and 2004, as Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, you've stated that you oversaw the turnaround of the economy after a period of high inflation, high interest rates, unsustainable external and domestic debt, and significant depreciation of the currency. Indeed, unfortunately, the chairman has said that we should be brief. I have a copy of the 2001 budget that you submitted, the first budget, 9th March 2001. And if you go through the budget, it's obvious that what you stated here is exactly what you did between 2001 and 2004. Now, my first question will be on procurement. Indeed, on 17th September 2004, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, in fact, you as the minister, you provided guidelines for single source procurement using public funds already approved by Parliament. And then, if you look at Preamble 5, you said institutions are required to satisfy 3 main conditions when applying for single sourcing. That is justification under Clause 40 of Act 663, capability and qualification of proposed firm, and conditions of contract and financial proposal. Now, if you look at annual reports of the Public Procurement Authority, we have several of them, but if I refer to even the 2014 annual report and 2015 annual report, the figures for sole sourcing are frightening. Indeed, for 2014, you have 452. And for 2015, sole sourcing. And for 2015, 666. That's the approved.
Can you justify sole source projects or amount?
No, projects. Approved and conditional approval. These are the reports. For 2015, 666. Indeed, if reports from the transition team are anything to go by, for 2016, it's even far higher. Now, would you agree that for all intents and purposes, the system appears to have been abused? And what measures would you advise should be put in place to curb this abuse? Yes, I've finished. Procurement.
I'm alarmed at these numbers, but I want further to know what is the total number out of which 666 were sole sourced. What percentage What percentage does this constitute? Was it more than half of it, or 80% of total procurement carried out? Just for us to have an idea whether the order of the day was sole sourcing.
Certainly, it appears from the reports, the annual report, official reports to Parliament, that it appears to be the order of the day. But later on, you can go through the reports.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think me and you, knowing the situation we find ourselves financially, this practice must certainly discontinue. And we have the Procurement Act, so that we make sure that the Act is respected. And whoever, we must be strict about it. This is a little frightening, but I would want to look at the details later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Designate. The second question is from the MPP manifesto. On page 5 of the, this is the highlights. We have the highlights and the major one, but they contain the same thing. On page 5 of the highlights, MPP's economic policy direction, it says to achieve our objectives, our principal economic policy direction will be to 1, restore macroeconomic stability, 2, shift the focus of economic management from taxation to production, 3, manage the economy competently, and 4, make the machinery of government work to deliver the benefits of progress to Ghanaians. You've answered, or you've addressed most of the issues, especially 1, 2, and 3. Now for the 4th one, make the machinery of government work to deliver the benefits of progress to Ghanaians. How would you address this? Or what advice would you give? First, what do we mean by slowing down of government work? And 2, how do we make the machinery of government work to deliver the benefits of progress to Ghanaians?
Thank you very much. I think it is important that decisions which are made by government are monitored and evaluated. And the creation of a ministry to do that kind of follow-up is certainly going to help improving the government machinery. And I think it's very clear from that particular clause that it says that the president wants machinery to be efficient. And therefore, he's insisting on the whole ministry to do monitoring and evaluation because you need it. Hitherto, perhaps people are giving jobs. Nobody follows up to ensure that things are done and done within time. It's not only that you do it, but this to take advantage of something must be done and done within a time frame. So I think we should all put our heads together to ensure efficiency and supervision of whatever is to be done and done properly.
Honorable Ada. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me put on record that it's unfair for you to keep my colleagues and I to the last minute and limit us to only one question each.
Thank you. This is positive discrimination.
Thank you. Us all the time to ask all the questions we want. Thank you very much. I'd like, first of all, to congratulate Hon.Osarfo Marfo on his nomination and to commend him most highly for the major impact that he's brought about in this economy, particularly introducing the Financial Administrations Act, Public Procurement Act, and the Internal Audit Act. I think these are to strengthen the economic management system of the nation. My colleague has asked the question that I wanted to ask, so I'll pass on to the education sector. On procurement. Now I come to education. Honorable, you were Minister of Education at the time, and Sports, and at the time I was at the Labor Ministry. We had some discussions, and it came out clearly that in your days, anybody coming out of Polytechnic would immediately earn higher than somebody coming out of a university if they worked in a factory. We are seeing the situation now where most polytechnics are being changed into universities. And we all know that universities are training people to become directors and executive directors of companies. if all the universities are changed to, the polytechnics are changed to universities. Technical universities, I know. But we may not have technical operational staff at the factories. Will there not be a gap? And if there is a gap, with the desire of the government to transform the economy through the economic sector by way of industrialization, how do we meet this gap? Thank you.
I think we have a problem in this country. Perhaps if we are talking about top 4 universities in the world, you cannot do without MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It is not a university. It's an institute of technology. And if you look at many other countries, this type of thinking makes the Institute of Technology very important because of the high level of skills that they bring about. And somehow, conceptually, most Ghanaians believe that they should have a university education. So there's a need to convert even all the polytechnics into universities, so that the title university will be attached to it. Whereas we could have developed along the lines of technologists without necessarily being universities. It's something that is psychological, and we should look at it. Because what we should be looking at is getting the required manpower to push development in this country, and not necessarily talking about university degrees. Talking about required skilled manpower to run the system. And when that happens, it means people will even earn more by being technologists than by being university graduates. That's my view. It's something we should revisit and think through.
Thank you. Honorable Member Fasqua.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Senior Minister Designate, congratulations. I also want to put it on record that Honorable has been my boss before, and he has been my mentor throughout at NIB. Honorable, on September 25th, 2015, countries all over the world, including Ghana, adopted a set of goals to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all, and therefore prescribe a sustainable development agenda. Each goal has specific targets. The government of the day has a role to play. In your role as a coordinator and as a supervisor, Honorable Senior Minister Designate, I would like to know what will be your role in ensuring that His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo's government is on track on the attainment of these goals? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I think the easiest way to attain these goals is to have these things coordinated so that the left knows what the right is doing to push a particular direction. So this role I am going to play will further enhance our chances of meeting these development goals, because we are going to make sure that we pick them one by one and see which knob to press to ensure that we get closer to achieving the goals. If we left them out uncoordinated, you can see the consequence. So the coordination becomes even more important and more emphatic. Thank you.
Now to leadership. Oh, you haven't had a chance at all. Right. You also have one opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Hon.Osarfo Marfo, congratulations. As a coordinator of sector ministries, by your definition, I know you are blessed with a lot of experience per your CV and practice. What do you think is the true economic state of the nation Ghana? Is there any hope for an ordinary Ghanaian? And the way forward? honorable nominee.
Honorable member, I think the economy is certainly not in the best of shape, but it is doable. I can put it that way. And perhaps it is because Ghanaians want that new direction. That's why they voted for us. And we should go in there and try to make a change. That's what I would say. Hope certainly there is. I mean, the situation has been worse for other countries before. And I don't see any problem. As I said, our economy is fundamentally strong. And therefore, if we discipline ourselves and do certain things right, we should be able to get ourselves out of the woods as soon as possible. But we need to work hard and discipline ourselves.
Thank you very much. Now to the leadership.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the nominee, going through your CV, there was a gap between 1989 and 1990. There was a missing information. I don't know whether you didn't do anything because your CV didn't tell us between 1989 and 90 what you were doing. So if you could kindly tell us.
Actually, if we had brought in months, this would have not been a problem. I left the Bank for Housing and Construction end of 89 and resumed January at NIB in 90. So there's no gap. It's a question of days. There's no gap. That one should be end of 89. I left. The government made the changes during the Christmas week, and we moved to our previous place. So in some TV, I put December, but I did not. That's why that impression is created. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. As a senior minister, as you yourself said, who is going to be in charge of coordination of all the activities, how do you intend to coordinate the various sectors to be able to deal with the growing unemployment in our country?
The unemployment is worsening because there is no growth. And therefore, what we have to do as a country is to make sure that we develop and push growth. From our manifesto, we are thinking of pushing growth from the private sector window. That's why we're talking about creating a friendly environment to bring on board a lot of the private sector activities to generate growth. And I can assure you that no government can solve unemployment using employment through the government channel. How many can the government employ in the public sector? Nothing, very little. Employment must come from the private sector. And this is how we should all think along and push it. If employment is going to come from the private sector, then we should make it easier for the private sector to thrive. So I think that is a collective effort and we should work along those lines.
You said the government can do nothing, but I
No,
thought
can do so by creating that environment to enable the private sector to thrive, to grow. But government should not dream of solving the unemployment problem by employing people in the public sector. How many can the civil service take at any point in time? Sir, at the time I was the Minister of Education, we had 6 public universities. 6 public universities. Today, as I speak, we have 650-something universities. So let us think gradually. Yes, private universities. Yes,
no,
400 and something.
No, 67.
Thank you.
67.
Sorry, 67. I don't say 67 universities. Now, private universities. Now compare the output of 6 and that of 67 plus 6 make it 73. Is it not scary in terms of output and opportunities available? So we should not be thinking about the public sector as a source of employment. It should be the private sector. We should push it hard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to find out from the nominee. He said that they will have to renegotiate the IMF deal or the IMF program. But in the MPP manifesto, page 15, they talked about reducing borrowing and debt. He himself said that when they renegotiate, they want to create space. And in this piece, he was mentioning about possible borrowing other cheap monies or with other better conditions to substitute the existing one. Whichever way, financing, to refinance the existing ones, whichever way you look at it, definitely there will be increase in debt. Because it's not possible for you to just have it going down. But your manifesto says, and in your campaign platform, you kept saying that you do everything to reduce debt, you are going to reduce borrowing. But when I heard you sitting, you clearly stated that you will have to do it with a better terms. How do you reconcile these two positions?
Hello, sir. When you talk about debt, it is your repayment which creates a liability for you. If I'm paying 100 cedis a month, and I'm able to reduce it to 50 cedis a month, as far as servicing the debt liability, I've come down by 50%. It's different from the corpus of the debt. So when you do refinancing, to such that your repayment comes down, you have reduced your debt. Because as a balance sheet, what you take on board is your repayment. That is what saddles you. And you can reduce it by various arrangements. So the two are not inconsistent. I don't know whether I make myself clear.
No, because if you borrow...
Let's say you borrow.
You may be...
But after borrowing, your stock debt goes up. But your repayment of 100, because of the new arrangements of the borrowing, comes to 50. On your monthly, call it overhang, you are paying 50 instead of 100. Is it not reduction?
No, I mean, that's why we were calling smart borrowing, and they said that it wasn't good. Because at the end of the day, I'm just looking at the terms that you use. You reduce borrowing, and you reduce the debt. Because if you borrow that you pay in 100 years, and you are not paying it today, it doesn't mean that your debt hasn't gone up. Like you yourself rightly said, the bench line is that your debt had gone up, but you promised that you were going to reduce the debt.
You have
That's what I'm
reduced
just
your
saying.
debt burden, and this would affect your cash flow, and that is what you need to run the system.
Well, anyway, in your earlier answer that you gave, you said that you had declared your asset twice. Did I hear you say that? My check, I know that you came to Parliament in 1997, am I right?
Yes.
So between 1997 to 2001, you were supposed to have another declaration. And then in 2005, you were supposed to have another declaration. And then when you left in 2009, so I knew that you should have had at least about 4 declarations. Why have you done 2? Because I can quote the Constitution for you. If you look at Article 286(1), (286)(1) says, a person who holds a public office mentioned in clause 5 of this article shall submit to the Auditor General a written declaration of all property or assets owned by or liabilities owned by him, whether directly or indirectly, A, within 3 months after coming into force of this Constitution or before taking office, as the case may be, B, at the end of every 4 years, and C, at the end of his term of office. So if you look at between 1997, maybe let me even take it back, because even as the MD for Bank NIB and Bank for Housing, State Corporation, all that, you were supposed to have declared your assets. So it couldn't have been that you should have declared your assets only twice in your life. No, okay, so 1992, even if you take that away, from 1997, the first 4 years ended 2001. You were supposed to have declared in 1997, and then in 2001, and then in 2005, and then in 2009. So at least the list should have been about 4 times. Why did you declare only twice?
I believe I've declared it more than that. I was talking about the exit, actually, because you have to declare when you are exiting, and that's what actually I was referring to.
Well, if that is what you are saying, we'll be happy to see the receipts, because just to confirm that you maybe it was a slip that you said twice, or you've done it more than that.
Okay.
But to just move on. When I look at your CV, your consultancy came into force before you left office. Your CV shows that the consultancy that you established was before you ended your tenure as a member of parliament. Am I right?
Yes.
And you know that when you do that as a member of parliament or a minister, you are supposed to go through
this check from your office. I
Members
got permission from the speaker in writing. Office of Profit.
I thought you were going to allow me to even finish.
Okay.
So I wanted to be sure that you got the certificate.
Yes, I got the permission.
You got the permission from the speaker to do that.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I want to know, as a senior minister, you say you'll be in charge of coordination. We also have economic management team. What will be different from what you'll be doing and what the economic management team will be doing?
Chairman, I've answered this same question more than 3 times, so I don't know why I want to repeat. I've answered this to other people. The same thing, put in the same way, so I don't know why you want us to repeat ourselves.
Well, let me.
Please ask another question.
I grant that. Maybe I didn't hear the answer, so I grant that. I want to find out from the senior minister. Will you be reporting to the chief of staff, or you'll be reporting directly to the president?
Somebody put it, this is a question of law. Every minister reports to the president. Please. Every minister reports to the president. And I will report to the president.
Because you said in your
I'll be reporting to the president.
You said earlier in answering question that the chief of staff will be dealing with matters in and around the president. Maybe not just quoting verbatim, but all you said was that the chief of staff will be dealing with issues around the office of president. And you know from that you will be reporting to the president mostly will be through the chief of staff. That's why I'm asking, are you going to be reporting to the chief of staff or directly to the president?
No, I will report direct to the president.
Mr. Chairman, my last question. Is sole sourcing illegal? And are you going, as a minister, senior minister who will be in charge of coordination, will you be doing, or will you encourage sole sourcing under some circumstances?
Honourable nominee, please. The answer is in the law, so it is not illegal.
Sole sourcing is not illegal. How can it be illegal?
So let me take this last one. I have the Transitional Act with me. In your earlier question about the appointments and what have you, you said that you have the right to review because you think that you've written a letter to the then chief of staff. I want to quote a section of the current Transition Act for you. 11.1. It says that 2 days before dissolution of Parliament, the clerk of Parliament shall summon a meeting of the elected members of Parliament to elect a speaker, and then on and on. But because this was inconsistent with the Constitution, we didn't do it. I'll be happy if you can show me whether in the Constitution or in the Act that you were variously making reference to, where it said, because an election has been done, 30 days to the end of the tenure, the president cannot do anything, but he has to wait for the incoming one to do. I'll be happy to know that because we are talking about legal issues, framework, how to govern our country, and you sit and you proudly say that you are going to review. Can we see where there's a breach, whether in the Transition Act or in the Constitution? Thank you.
I don't have a copy with me, and I just wouldn't know. If I had my copy and were looking at it, I would. But are you aware that there is a timetable for submission of the handing over notes to the Administrator General? That's what I was referring to.
Since he wants clarification. Yes, but that doesn't say that if you hand over, you give handing over, it doesn't mean that the government council are hot and they cannot do anything and cannot act.
You don't do major things.
What do you call major? So what do you call major?
Why are you asking us to submit your report?
Honorable nominee, please don't respond. He's finished his answers. Honorable Haruna, please.
Mr. Chairman, let me thank you for the opportunity and let me congratulate Engineer Hon.Osarfo Marfo. He served the country in very many different respects. My first will be to respond to a matter of law. Now, if you copiously refer to the Transition Act, and the Transition Act provides that handing over notes shall be made available to the administrator 1 month before the election. Do you agree that you couldn't have had a transition team before the election?
The transition team should be in place 48 hours after the results have been declared. And this is very specific in the law.
Therefore, the 1 month before the election,
24 hours. The inauguration should be 48 hours.
Therefore, 1 month before the election, there was no team that ought to have received and could have received a handing over notice. Do you agree?
No, that should be the Administrator General. Administrator General.
Chairman, can I have the floor? I'm just suggesting to Honorable Hon.Osarfo Marfo that ministers complied with this provision, and handing over notes pursuant to the Transition Act was made available to the Administrator General.
So why didn't the Administrator General give them to us?
He had to wait until the joint transition team was constituted per the requirement of the 48 hours after the election, and that was done.
Mr. Chairman, after the 48 hours elapsed, we received 8 out of about 30. So why would you say that it was done? If you were there, you remember. They brought a letter for 10, and when we got there, there were only 8 in it. And then they requested for more time to bring the rest. We gave more time, and even there, it took us almost 2 weeks to get the one of the presidency.
Chairman, I ought not to. First of all, let me establish that under Article 11 of the Constitution, the Transition Act is not superior to the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. And therefore, you will be swearing an oath as minister. And in that oath, you will be swearing that you would uphold the laws and the Constitution of Ghana, which includes Article 66 that the Honorable Samson Ahi referred to. Will you respect that?
Read that law again, please.
Article 66, as Honorable Samson referred to, defines the tenure of government and the presidency, which tenure is 4 years, lapsing midnight before the dawn of 7th January. Will you recognize that acts that are done, save that which are unlawful, are within the mandate of the administration?
Certainly.
Thank you. May I now refer you to, I'm holding the budget statement of 2004. You were then Honorable Hon.Osarfo Marfo, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. We've heard you make public commitments and pledges to review corporate taxes. And I'm quoting, Mr. Speaker, in order to ease the tax burden on the corporate sector, I'll jump the rest. Corporate income tax rate from the current 32.5% to 30%. Would you admit that you are inheriting a better corporate tax regime today?
I would say yes and no. I would say yes because we are inheriting 25. But as we brought it from 32, depending on the period, if I were managing, I would have had tax at about 20% by now. It's a period you are looking at. So you can't just say that for all that period, you want to attract businesses. It depends. But yes, it is lower than what it was at the time. And you are talking about 2004.
May I also refer you to page 82, another 202 financial year budget statement, Honorable Hon.Osarfo Marfo. Today I've heard you on nuisance tax and VAT and others, and I quote, the VAT service will focus attention this year on taxable services provided within the finance and banking sector. Therefore, are these taxes new? This was in 2002, where you were charging VAT on the financial and banking sector.
They are not new, but time-wise today is inappropriate because time changes and we've got to change it. And see, taxation is a function of time. And you are in competition with your neighbors, you are in competition with others, and therefore, something which you could hold and defend in 2002, you cannot defend in 2016. I'm surprised you are not paying attention to time and you are just referring this. Yes.
Honorable Engineer Hon.Osarfo Marfo, in October 2004, you have worked with the World Bank and the IMF, and you are aware that the IMF deals with governments.
Yes.
And you are aware that the government of Ghana has a 3-year external credit facility with the IMF. Its review has to be consensual, not unilateral. Will you say that the decision by your economic management team for a review is as yet a unilateral decision?
You don't know what has happened in between. The IMF is sending an advance team on the 3rd of February as a staff mission. And before they did, we have had discussions with our vice president. And we have indicated the need for a review because of our own policies. And they will come around 15th, 16th for actual visit and possible review. So I think a lot has gone on between us and the IMF. They deal with the governments and they are dealing with the current government, and that's normal.
Whilst I agree with you, the IMF have always sent review teams to Ghana. That is not the same thing as renegotiating aspects of an agreement that was concluded between the government of Ghana and the IMF as its memorandum of economic framework. What aspects of it do you intend to seek review on? Is it on 0% financing from Bank of Ghana? Is it on fiscal? Let us know. Or reforms within the public sector?
One, I give you 2 dates. I said they're coming early in February as a staff. That's not for the review. They are coming middle of February for the review exercise. And we're already talking with them because we must do the review before our budget comes out early in March. Because our budget should translate the figures we will arrive at with the fund into the budget. And therefore, we have all this slotted in our dates.
Honorable nominee, you have served this country right as Minister of Finance. In your budget statement, you have indicated that this government will borrow, appreciating the fact that we have acquired middle income status, and therefore that affects your fiscal space in terms of borrowing. How might you intend to borrow for this year, and will it reflect in your economic policy statement for 2017?
I've not, at the moment as I speak, we don't even have all accurate figures from both Bank of Ghana and Minister of Finance. We are getting a lot of inconsistencies arriving out what we call arrears in the pipeline, the Control Accountant General's office, etc. I will not be in the position to talk about financial gap. You can only talk about borrowings when you have determined some of these things, which we are not able to do now. So I can't really talk about level of borrowing.
Thank you very much. You would be minister in an amorphous nomenclature of senior minister, or otherwise as defined by you, minister responsible for coordinating economic ministries. How do you intend to use that to address the growing unemployment in the country, as you indicated in your earlier submissions?
This has been answered. This has been answered twice, please.
Honorable.
Yes, I do. May I now refer to your CV?
The same question.
May I refer to your CV? And honorable colleagues, we are assuming that the CV is tendered in as part of the evidence before this committee. And since it's under oath, membership of professional body and membership of professional bodies, just watch under the third page of your CV. I'm sure you want to do some realignment there. I can't see how Nestle Ghana Limited or Redco Limited will be professional bodies. I see your good friend Alhaji Aminu at your back. His name, is it spelled Amenu, A-M-E, or the Aminu that I know? Would you want to further look at those portions of your CV? It's indicated as reference, Alhaji Engineer Amenu Amado. I know it's Aminu Amado.
Thank you for the correction.
You referred to some taxes as nuisance taxes. As Minister of Finance, and inheriting thereupon from you was the introduction of a national stabilization levy. Will you describe that as nuisance tax then?
It was certainly not a nuisance. We inherited a debt that needed certain other measures to rake in inflows. And it did the job it was supposed to do. It wasn't a nuisance. It was a levy. It wasn't a tax. And it applies specifically to certain sectors. If you recall, we talk about the financial sector and other things. So it wasn't a tax, it was a levy.
Honorable Minister Designate, the review exercise and possible renegotiation of the IMF, you referred to continuing for purposes of policy credibility. 0% Bank of Ghana financing. What will be your thought economically? Is it a good thing to do, or you intend to renegotiate Ghana out of that, and why?
First of all, I think zero financing from Bank of Ghana, to me, was unnecessary, and we'll have to review it.
Chairman, we haven't...
In any case, even though you negotiated zero financing Bank of Ghana, in practice, you are nowhere near the zero financing from Bank of Ghana. In practice, is grossly overdone.
You alluded to inheriting a fiscal deficit of between 8 to 9%. You are aware, given your background, that once you have that deficit, its management will affect growth, and its management will affect the extent to which you deal with related monetary policy issues of inflation. How do you intend, with the deficit that you describe as worrying, intend to grow the economy with a deficit and the matter of debt financing?
Deficit of 8-9 is worrying, particularly when your projection is 5. And therefore, we have to take certain extra measures on the inflow. The whole matter is your inflow and the expenditure. We must check the expenditure and try to increase the inflow to a level that will make this deficit a temporary situation. Because if it becomes a temporary situation, then the growth can come. But I agree that growing under 8 to 9% is difficult. But we must find an answer to it, and that answer is in the inflow. And with the type of suggestions we have received as a transitional team from loopholes, I think that it is doable.
Are you aware that the Eurobond of 2007 is due the first quarter of 2017 by way of natural inheritance? How does government intend to ring fence and finance that?
Then when you get to the bridge, you cross it. I don't have all the data. So picking this thing one by one, trying to resolve it, is difficult. when we cross the bridge, when I have all the financial data in front of us, we can easily resolve it in a suitable way.
Chairman, my final question. You are reported, to which you have given a brilliant exposition on making comments that sought to polarize the country. Do you have any regrets, and would you want to expunge those aspects of it that were attributed to you if they were true?
He has answered. Mr. Nominee, please. You have answered the question. Yes. I think we'll prove. Thank you very much, Honorable Minority Leader. Shall we proceed to the Vice Chairman, please?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment? I don't think the Minority Leader is trying to say that when people attribute wrong things to you, you come and you apologize. How? No, I won't do it, because it is not what I said. It was taken completely out of context. People twisted for their own economic advantage, and I will not withdraw or apologize, because it never happened the way you are talking about it.
Thank you. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable Minister Designate, Senior Minister, on page 2 of your CV, you have indicated that you served as Minister for Finance between the periods of 2001 to 2004. I want to ask from you, what were your achievements at the ministry, your challenges, and how you bring to bear all these experiences in your new role? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think when we assumed power, inflation was 40.5%. I'm talking about 2001 December. It was 40.5%. Chairman, when I was leaving that ministry, inflation on point-to-point basis had fallen to 12.8%. When I assumed our foreign reserve was about 325 million. When I was leaving office, it was about 1-point-something billion at the fall in that period. You may also recall that when you go HIPIC, it has been the tradition that every country that has gone to HIPIC until Ghana's takes 4 years from decision point to completion point. We took 2.5 years. And at the Paris Club, the Sarkozy, who was then the Minister of Finance, made it clear to Dr. Baumi and myself, who were at that completion point discussion, that Ghana has set a new record, the completion point of the HIPIC, because no country had done it under 4 years. And when they say you've done, they give you certain indicators to meet, and we had met all the indicators, and in fact, they were refusing even to give it until the British Minister for Finance, who became the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, said that, Mr. Chairman, Ghana has met all the conditions. This is not legality. This is performance. Let them have the completion point. So generally, I think the way we met the minister and what we left behind, we were satisfied that we did a good job. And the growth, as he also pointed out, the growth was 3.7. And for the first time continuously, so Ghana grows and comes up and down like this, consistently every year, from 2001 to 2008, every year there was increment. And when I left, it was about 5.6% GDP. So I felt very happy that I'd done my contribution to managing the economy, managing it right.
No further questions.
The last one, and people say it without any, every time people are talking, they say in every election year there is a deficit. Every election year there is overspending. During my time in the election year 2004, deficit was below the IMF recommended of 5%. The deficit was 4.2%. So there was no overspending that year.
Mr. Chairman, there's two questions. Mr. Nominee, the Constitution provides in Article 1832, 1832B, that the Bank of Ghana shall be the sole custodian of state funds of Ghana, both in and outside Ghana, and may, by notice published in the Gazette, authorize any other person or authority to act as a custodian of any such fund as may be specified in the notice. Mr. Nominee, are you aware that there's been some lodgement in some other banks of monies that are state funds of Ghana without proper authorization and without any publication in the Gazette? Are you aware?
Chairman, I'm not aware. I'll be happy if you can give some more details later on after this.
Very well. It will be responded to accordingly. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Nominee, you spoke about the review of certain recruitments. Are you aware that recruitment of some senior staff in certain establishments, which would require the approval of the boards, did not happen, and yet the chief executives have recruited senior staff into those establishments? Are you aware?
I'm not aware, Mr. Chairman, but it's interesting to note that we have very well laid down procedure in recruitment of certain levels. And if anybody is recruited, not going through the procedure, there should be advertisement, there should be interview panel, certain people must be part of the interview panel for the public service, that kind of thing. If these did not take place, obviously, such appointments, in my view, can easily be declared null and void.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nominee. I have just one question for you. On Article 181, all loans should be with approval of Parliament. The IMF agreement, which Ghana government is operating now, is a loan. Now, that agreement was not put before Parliament. Do you think Ghana should be bound by this agreement?
Mr. Chairman, when we were looking at it last week, it was brought to our attention. And we don't want to approach it by that angle, though. But it is a fact that under Article 181, the law was breached. But we want harmony, and we do not want a situation where the international community would come in and also read meaning into it, that Ghana has entered into some illegality with IMF and that kind of thing. So I think the best is that the review will bring it to Parliament. So if we review, there will be different figures. There should be different figures, and we'll bring it to Parliament.
Thank you, Mr. Nominee. We thank you for attending upon the committee. You will hear from us again. Thank you. I think I recognize certain senior members here. I've seen Honorable Hackman Owusu-Ajimang, as a member of Parliament for 3 terms. 4 terms, yes, and a former Minister of State. Do I see any other person? Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Salome, you are discharged.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having the honor of appearing before you and putting me through how many hours of quiz. So I'm very happy that I've had the chance to interact with you, because through this process, a lot of questions have been answered. It's important. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.